there'd been a fire in the Elizabeth Road area of Boston.
Police discovered a woman, early 30s, in a flat on her own, dead.
It was clearly a very violent, cold-blooded killing.
It was scary, not something you expect to happen on your doorstep.
The people of Boston feared that there was a killer at large.
We thought, is this to do with this gang-related thing? They'd just got her. They'd found out where she lived and got her.
In the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside is the thriving market town of Boston.
Boston's a town that's steeped in history. At one stage it was the second largest port in the UK to Liverpool. You've got such things as the Guildhall.
You've got a nice Boston stamp. It's a big church, which is very beautiful architecture. You can see from anywhere. If you get lost, just to look for a Boston stamp.
Because it's rural, you've got plenty of nice open spaces, and then you've got a town with local people in it, local trades.
It was a small village and now it's a town, and they're very lovely people, very laid back. They have a very Bostonian humour about them.
Anybody that comes past, it's always good morning. It's not like city life where they just ignore each other.
No, we'd be sat on the doorstep having a cup of tea. An old woman or someone comes past, you're like, all right, good morning.
Yeah, you don't know him from Adam, but you just say good morning.
Yeah.
With its surrounding farmland, Boston has long been a draw for those looking for work.
Boston is essentially the vegetable breadbasket of the United Kingdom. About a third of the fresh fruit and vegetable comes from that area in the whole of the UK.
Farmers need, packhouses need X amount of casual labour. Boston doesn't hold that amount of casual labour, so that labour has to come in from elsewhere. And that's always been the case all the way back.
In recent years, the town has been transformed by the arrival of workers from across Europe.
Boston's changed incredibly over the last 20 years with the migration from the European Union. It's had the highest amount of migration for anywhere in the country. The first wave came from Portugal, but gradually as more Eastern European countries came into the EU, it was predominantly Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and then Poland, and latterly Bulgaria and Romania.
Many European people here. There's lots of factory and field work, jobs around, many cabbages. That's where you got sprouts for Christmas. So we are not that bad.
33-year-old Marina Urte moved to Boston in 2007 to start a new life for herself.
Marina came from Latvia. She found work at a fruit packaging plant, and I think she was fairly popular there and well-liked.
She was more crazier than me. No, she was a lovely girl. She was beautiful, quite popular. When she started her work, she'd been offered higher position than other people. She was like a leader.
She was known as being quite frank and quite honest, but also a hard worker.
She wanted jobs done right. She would tell you where to go, what to do and how to do. And if obviously somebody was doing something wrong, she wouldn't be quiet. Quite perfectionist.
We were working together in the same factories, and we would go out partying sometimes, but I would say most of our time we would spend at the job. Me and Marina, we were similar in terms of career progression and temperament and wanting to improve, earn more money and create more comfortable life for us.
Marina had settled into Boston, and with a steady job and a new group of friends, she met 33-year-old Gytis Griskavikas.
She met Gytis in 2009. He came from Lithuania.
He used to work with us at the factory as well. He was a very nice, intelligent guy, very friendly, very caring. And I just remember that he turned up at our door, taking her out somewhere. They were really happy, they were really in love.
And they married quite quickly, I think, in 2010.
They have a nice wedding, and she have a nice dress, and it was like a fairy tale, like a big love story. They loved each other, and they was really in love and happy.
He was flying, and he had all the sparks in his eyes, and Marina, so yeah, they were in love.
And it wasn't long before Marina and Gytis decided to start a family together. In November 2010, Marina gave birth to their baby daughter.
She was very good mommy. She adored her little girl. She was always calling her little princess, always.
Gytis, likewise, was also a good husband and a good dad. They were a normal, happy family.
Sadly, the relationship between Marina and Gytis didn't last. But they both agreed to raise their daughter together whilst living separately. And as Marina continued to impress at her job, she began to think big for her future.
She was always taking care of flowers, and she always dreamed to have some little shop with many different kinds, and she would sell them for special occasions like weddings or big birthdays.
But in the summer of 2016, everything changes when one of Marina's neighbours calls an emergency engineer, believing there's been a gas leak.
The next door neighbour smelt something under her stairs.
But when the engineer arrives, he suspects the smell is coming from Marina's flat and looks through her letterbox. They spot a smouldering fire and call the fire brigade immediately.
Fire rescue.
Oh, hello. I've been called to the downstairs flat, but we can smell smoke from upstairs, and there's fire damage to the stairs.
Right, okay.
I remember learning there'd been a fire in the Elizabeth Road area of Boston. I don't think there was any obvious sign of the fire from outside, but certainly the neighbours were aware that it had been a fire.
The lady from downstairs thinks there'll be somebody inside upstairs, but we can't get up the stairs because they're too damaged.
Okay, we have got fire crews on the way to it, okay.
Firefighters force their way into the flat and put out the smouldering fire, whilst checking if anyone is home. At first it appears empty, but as the crew enter the bathroom, they make a shocking discovery.
They find a woman, early 30s, in a flat on her own, dead, obviously by strange circumstances, in a bath, no water in the bath, covered in soot, with a hose on top of her. You know, you think, good gracious, you know, how on earth has this happened?
Police are immediately called to the scene.
I want to know what the cause of death is roughly at that stage. So is it a homicide? Is it suspicious? I mean, just because a body's been found in the bath doesn't necessarily mean it's suspicious. It could have been an accidental fire or something like that.
Police quickly established that the dead woman is Marina Ertey. It becomes obvious she has been brutally attacked, with horrific injuries to her face and body. A murder investigation is immediately launched and officers secure the scene.
It's all about scene preservation. The scene can tell you a phenomenal amount, and the last thing that you need is that scene corrupting.
News of Marina's death quickly spreads through the street.
We all gets moved out of the flat, and then the next hour or so, turns out she's been murdered in a battle. We never, ever thought for a second that there was a murder. We just generally thought there was a fire. Not something you expect to happen on your doorstep. It's just crazy.
In the quaint market town of Boston, Lincolnshire, the usual tranquility has been disturbed by the sirens of fire engines, and neighbours on Elizabeth Road are stunned to learn that not only was the fire set deliberately, but that 33-year-old Marina Ertey has been brutally murdered.
The residents were shocked to learn that it was a murder because initially, like everyone else, they thought it was a fire.
Everybody was in shock. You just didn't know how to get your head around it.
There was always a police car parked just there on the side.
constant flashes, weren't there?
Yeah.
Forensic cameras, it was just unreal, wasn't it?
It's just not what we expected at all.
It is a quiet area, so for something like this just happen, like, I think it did shake everybody up, to be honest.
When a crime like that hits Boston, it's very painful to hear. Some Bostonian people, they do feel afraid, they feel afraid going out. It just brings this grey shadow over your community.
As Marina has been senselessly attacked in her home for no apparent reason, the community is on high alert.
The people of Boston feared that there was a killer at large.
It was scary. There was always that worry of somebody coming back. They could have potentially took more lives.
It isn't long before Marina's family and friends learn of the brutal attack on their loved one.
Someone texted me saying that the fire brigade and police is there, so she's been killed.
I was in shock. I couldn't believe. It was my birthday, so obviously from very high happiness I went in deep sadness and proper shock. I thought, what? Is that really possible?
With a murder investigation underway, police need to establish a timeline of Marina's last known movements.
There's all sorts of inquiries that need to be made. We would have people immediately looking for CCTV in the area. We'd have people very, very quickly knocking on doors to find out who's been seen in the area, who hasn't. We need to find out when this happened, because that's the starting point, isn't it? When was she last seen, and who was she last seen by? Also, where she worked, who she would normally work with, when should she have been in at work last?
Officers speak to Marina's colleagues at the fruit packing factory where she worked and narrow the time frame on her last known movements.
Police discovered Marina hadn't turned in for work 5 o'clock that morning. So clearly, whatever had happened before that time. And that's absolutely key part of the investigation.
Back at the scene, police and fire experts examine the cause of the fire and quickly establish it had been purposely set after Marina had died.
The early forensic evidence showed that a fire had been set in the flat, but it didn't take properly, so the house wasn't badly damaged by fire.
The fire didn't really take, I think it was just slow burning. But if they'd done a good job on the fire, it could have just took this whole block. That was scary.
With the fire having been set after the attack, detectives speculate whether Marina's killer had tried to destroy evidence at the scene.
They won't have known if they left any forensic evidence there. They won't have known if they left any fingerprints there. They won't have known for sure that someone didn't see them either going or coming back.
Forensic experts are called in. They need to examine the scene to find any clues that might point to Marina's attacker.
When we got there, it was obvious that I wasn't able to do my job. The reason I couldn't do it is because the fire that was started on the stairs had produced a certain excessive amount of soot throughout the flat. And the whole flat was covered in a thin layer of soot, which meant you couldn't see the blood. So at that point, after a brief look around, and we did locate some bloodstains, but it was obvious that the extent of that was much more than what we could see, we decided to go home and have a team of people come in and de-soot the scene, and then us to go back after that process has been done.
Forensics must wait until the thick layer of soot is meticulously cleared before they can work. But detectives do manage to question Marina's ex-husband, Gitas. He says he hasn't seen her, but reveals some information which leads investigators to look deeper into Marina's personal life. And they uncover some disturbing connections to some violent people.
Following the ending of her relationship with Gitas in 2015, she'd formed a new relationship. And it was quickly discovered that she had been involved in a very recent trial at Lincoln Crown Court. She had been charged with perverting the course of justice after her new partner was involved in a violent attack on another group of East Europeans.
The man in question is 42-year-old Alexandra Kudryasov.
Alexander, he worked at the same factory as well. Alexander was involved in what's it called, criminal activity and deviant behaviours and everything. He's got quite a rough background.
Police found out that her new boyfriend had recently been sent to prison for 18 years for grievous bodily harm, dreadful attack involving knives, and Marina herself had been acquitted for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice in providing him with an alibi, only a matter of days before her body was found. Clearly, it was an obvious line of inquiry that her death might be something to do with those circumstances.
Police want to know, was Marina's involvement in a gang dispute anything to do with her death? Could this have been a revenge attack?
One theory that the police would have been exploring is that maybe one members of the group that were the victims would exact revenge on Marina's partner, and the fact that he'd been convicted and was now out of the way meant that, of course, there was no one to protect Marina at the time.
Police explore the possibility Marina had become mixed up with a bad crowd through her relationship with Alexander. The theory of a revenge attack takes hold, and the safety of Marina's friends and family becomes a police priority.
The fact that a group of East European men have been very, very badly injured by another group of East European men, obviously down in Boston there would have been tensions between the various people involved, the various families.
Clearly, one of the concerns for the police initially was the welfare of the child, and any other family members as well.
As police make sure Marina's loved ones are kept safe, post-mortem results arrive which offer clues to her attacker.
Marina had suffered traumatic brain injury, and she had fractured eye sockets and other injuries.
We know that it wasn't a knife used. It could have been done with fists, kicking, or a blunt instrument.
It was clearly a very violent and cold-blooded killing.
And with the scene now cleared of soot from the fire, forensic results arrive, which further paints a horrific picture.
What we found was a large pool of blood in the living room with smears around it, and there were small spots of blood radiating from it, indicating that there's been impacts in that area, probably into Marina herself. I suspect that she's gone into the living room for whatever reason, been hit, gone down almost straight away, and then been assaulted on the floor by punching or kicking or with a blunt instrument.
Forensic results also show bloodied track marks from the living room to the bathroom.
The two track marks is where her heels were in contact with the ground as she's been dragged across the landing and into the bathroom. In the bathroom, there were spatters of blood around the bath and on the floor to indicate that she'd been further assaulted in that area. Her body was found naked in the bath. There was no blood-stained clothing, so when it happened, she was most likely naked. And the pathologist said that Maria had actually been drowned by having the shower head forced into her mouth, and it was that which actually killed her in the end, was the cause of death.
But who could have carried out such an horrific attack? Had Marina become sucked into a gangland dispute and paid the ultimate price for it?
We'd heard that she'd gone to court to do with this gang-related thing.
Yeah.
We thought she'd just got her. They'd found out where she lived and got her.
In the Lincolnshire town of Boston, police are investigating the murder of 33-year-old Marina Urte, who was found in her own home beaten and drowned in the bath. Her boyfriend, Alexandra Kudryasov, is in prison, serving an 18-year sentence for a vicious attack during a gangland dispute. Whilst he is ruled out as a suspect, there are suspicions that Marina has been murdered in a gangland revenge attack.
After it happened, we used to see this really spruced up black car coming past. We kept thinking, oh, is this to do with, like, this gang-related thing? That's pretty much everybody's first thoughts, wasn't it?
But police are keeping an open mind.
It's the age-old adage, ABC of investigating. Accept nothing, believe no one, and check absolutely everything. If it was anything to do with the grievous bodily harm trial and Marina being acquitted of conspiracy and almost a revenge attack by perhaps those people that had been the victims in the first place, one would expect it to be almost tit for tat. Revenge is usually about, I'm going to give you what you gave to me. That's what revenge is. Revenge doesn't normally extend to attacking a defenseless woman in her own home, viciously and violently over a prolonged period of time. That, to me, was not a revenge attack.
Police also suspect that the lack of a forced entry points to a different explanation.
That immediately means to me, this is personal. That would be my first thought there. This is not a random attack. This isn't a burglary gone wrong or anything like that. This is personal, for some reason or other. Whoever did this to Marina knew her, and Marina knew them and had let them in the house.
With this latest theory, police look closely at Marina's inner circle.
One of the key elements is always to find out who saw the victim alive last.
Police would have been looking to question those who were closely connected to Marina. That would have been her former partner and her former husband, also her sister who lived nearby. As every police officer knows, most murders are committed by people known to the victim, so it would have been their primary avenue of inquiry.
As Marina and her ex-husband Gytis had shared custody of their daughter, police question him about the last time he saw her.
Under questioning, Gytis did disclose his movements on the night and day before the murder. He disclosed that he'd been celebrating his birthday.
He immediately said, yeah, Marina had come to his house, had then gone to a supermarket and bought some whiskey, and then gone back to her flat.
This would have been late in the evening into the early hours of the next day. And he said that he left Marina's flat at 2 o'clock in the morning and that when he left she was fine.
They had a pleasant evening, they'd had a few drinks, but there was nothing else. He was saying, it's not me.
With Gytis admitting to being with Marina on the night of the murder, but claiming to have left on good terms at 2 a.m, investigators have little else to link him to the murder.
That he'd said that he'd been at the flat the night before. That poses actually an interesting dilemma for a senior investigating officer. Is what do you do with that? It's only suspicion. There is no hard evidence. You are hoping you're going to find some hard evidence through maybe forensic examination of the scene, CCTV, or anything like that, but that takes a long time.
Even without evidence against Gytis, police need to act fast in case he is in any way connected to the crime.
As the senior investigating officer, it's your decision whether to arrest a suspect, and not only whether to arrest a suspect at that time, when you do it and under what circumstances. The senior investigating officer in this case took the view that it was the most advantageous way for the investigation was to make an early arrest.
Gytis Griskevicius is arrested on suspicion of the murder of his ex-wife Marina.
Won't have been an easy decision. There would have been a train of thought, undoubtedly, about, well, there's no evidence here that he's involved. There will have been opinions within senior officers, probably more senior than the SIO in this case, that he shouldn't have been arrested. We would know that we'd only be able to keep him in custody a maximum of 24 hours, and if no evidence came forward during that period of time, he'd have to be released. So it's not a straightforward decision.
With the time ticking against them, police further question Gytis under caution.
He gave the same story as he'd done before he'd been arrested, that he'd been there with Marina voluntarily, he'd left around 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was fine when he left her.
But with Gytis now in custody, police can delve deeper into his life to find any evidence that might connect him to Marina's murder.
Once we arrest him, the purpose of that is to enable the police to search the house, search his vehicle, search him, examine him for any injuries.
On closer examination, officers notice an injury on Gytis's right hand, which he explains was caused by an accident. Despite the suspicious injury and Gytis being the last known person to see Marina alive, the police have no further evidence. And Gytis has been in custody for almost 24 hours.
One has to make a decision. Have we got enough evidence here to charge him? Clearly they hadn't.
Gytis is released on bail.
The news obviously left question marks for people in the area. Was this the man? Had they caught the killer? Or was the perpetrator still at large?
Police now move their focus away from Gytis and cast the net wider. They trawl through hours of CCTV across the local area in hopes to find anything that might lead them to Marina's killer.
They would have trawled hundreds of hours of CCTV.
CCTV examination is an art form. It isn't just a straightforward process. It can take weeks and weeks and weeks to do it methodically. Some of the bigger police forces these days have dedicated teams whose sole job it is to do that.
And after hours of examination, police find footage from the early hours of the 20th of May, the day Marina was thought to have been murdered. And it places Gytis back in the frame.
They managed to find him on CCTV.
The footage shows Gytis running towards Marina's house at 9:30 p.m. Rather than he had claimed, heading there with Marina after a party at his. Then, 2 hours later at 11:30 p.m, Marina and Gytis are seen together at a nearby supermarket. And then, crucially, he is caught on camera returning to his house much later than 2 a.m, the time he told police.
So he had not left Marina's home at 2 o'clock in the morning and gone straight home. He was seen around 7:30 in the morning, and I believe he got back to his own premises around about 8 o'clock in the morning. So straight away they know he wasn't where he said he was, when he said he was there. The story he gave from the outset was a pack of lies.
The CCTV footage disproves Gytis' story and places him near to the scene on the morning of the murder. But the police still need more evidence to strengthen their case.
The police would then start thinking, well, how can we bolster this circumstantial evidence?
The police then begin to find other pieces of evidence that link him to the murder. A pair of his shorts were found in his washing machine, which he was seen to be wearing on CCTV.
And lo and behold, no blood was found on the shorts or anything like that. But the police would then say, well, where's the hoodie that he was wearing? Where are the T-shirt that he was wearing? Where's his footwear? Where are his socks? None of which was ever found. The fact that he couldn't account for that, again, just adds to the circumstantial evidence.
Gytis' phone is seized and searched, which raises further suspicion.
They found he had inadvertently wiped all the data off his phone.
The police believe Gytis deliberately wiped his phone to hide incriminating messages. But with the only evidence being circumstantial, and forensic results from the scene showing no strong link to Gytis being the killer, will it be enough to charge him for murder? Or will the theory of a gang-related revenge attack for the crimes of her boyfriend hold the truth to the killing? Lincolnshire police are investigating the murder of 33-year-old mum Marina Urte. And although they have circumstantial evidence that links her ex-husband Gytis Griskevičius to the crime, they are lacking forensic evidence. Meanwhile, her new boyfriend is serving 18 years in prison for a violent assault on a rival gang, and there's a theory Marina could have been killed in a revenge attack. Then the police make an announcement. The Crown Prosecution Service has decided to send the case to trial. And it's Gytis they believe is the killer.
Following the CCTV and other pieces of evidence, Gytis was rearrested and charged with the murder.
Gytis pleads not guilty. And with the evidence being mainly circumstantial, the police have their work cut out to prove there is enough to convict him.
Certainly the lead up to a trial for murder involves a phenomenal amount of work. Making sure the evidence is presented in the correct fashion, making sure witnesses turn up. My feeling at the beginning of every murder trial I've been involved in was a fear of being perceived to have let the victim and the victim's family down. They are completely beholding upon you as an individual to bring some justice for their loved one.
In March 2017, the trial into Marina's murder begins at Lincoln Crown Court. And as Marina's friends and family enter the courtroom, they come face to face with her alleged killer.
When I came in, he looked at me with the eyes full of almost tears, and he looked at me as if I didn't do it.
As the trial begins, Marina's close friends reveal to the court details of her relationship with Gytis.
I remember she came to me when she was already heavily pregnant, and she was complaining that she's put on so much weight and Gytis is not happy anymore because she's not in the same shape as before. So I did notice that something was off. Why would you judge your wife for being a bit overweight when she's carrying your child?
And as time went by, the relationship continued to break down.
Then Gytis stopped investing into the family, doing anything around the house. And she would work and she would take all overtimes. So sometimes she would go weeks without a day off. And she would mention to him, maybe you should work more, or maybe you should at least wash the dishes. Then he would turn it back on her and humiliate her in terms of the weight or how she looks.
Marina then began to consider a life away from her husband.
She said to me that she wants a real man who'd take care of her and she would feel loved and cared for.
And in 2015, Marina broke off the relationship. And it wasn't long before she met her new partner, Alexander.
Marina was very happy. She said that I finally feel like a woman and I finally feel like I've been cared for. He gave me a perfume, and she said that over all these years with Gytis, he never gave her anything like that. She felt so much appreciated.
And friends revealed to the court that Gytis did not take Marina's new relationship well.
Griskevičius was still besotted with Marina. They'd split acrimoniously, but he still harboured a desire to get back with her. And he hated the fact that she was now with someone else.
He was described as being very jealous about the new boyfriend.
I met with him a few times on the street, and he said, how could she leave him because he's so good in bed. So he was not even thinking about the quality of life. He was raging about if his size is larger than his, how could she swap me for someone else?
But when Marina was arrested for perverting the course of justice, Gytis decides to use their daughter as leverage to get her back.
When police come up and arrested her, she didn't have a passport, she lost the job, and she didn't have a place to live. She lost everything, and in that moment, he got the girl.
She was praying and hoping that everything's gonna work out so she could then finally reunite with her daughter.
When she was fully acquitted of any wrongdoing, Marina asked to be reunited with her daughter. But Gytis refused.
I told him that you probably ought to allow Marina see the child, at least under the supervision of social workers in the children's center once a week for a few hours. She's probably missing her mother, and he was absolutely reluctant to do that, and he mentioned that we don't even mention mother's name in the house. Her girl was not allowed to pronounce her name in front of him.
He was sending her nasty messages about the girl, like no money, no honey, asking for money. Then he was taking girl out from the country, which she supposed not to do, and then posting in a Facebook saying, oh, hello, we are here. That was very nasty.
And things only got worse for Marina.
Marina had made all sorts of complaints against Griskevicius. She couldn't prove any of them. I think her vehicle had been damaged, she'd had a pedal bike stolen. She didn't know that it was him for sure, but she thought it really was, and it frightened her. There were a couple of occasions when she went to the police because he was seen filming her on his mobile phone, arriving at her house unannounced, and it spooked her to such an extent she went to the police.
I think Marina had confided in certain friends that she was worried that Gytis was stalking her.
She rings me one day, she says, he was standing on the corner of the street looking at the house.
However, in the last few days of Marina's life, hers and Gytis' relationship seemed to rekindle.
They restarted the communication. She rang me and she was so happy to say, oh, you don't know what just happened. I will see the child soon and he's talking to me in a nice way. And she was willing to resolve the conflict for her, for the daughter, and for him, for Gytis even. Just before the day, she rang me and she was very excited. And she said, he said that he loves me and he wants to get back. He's the father of my child. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And he wants to come over. He wants to celebrate his birthday with me. And I did tell her, do not meet him on your own.
Griskevicius was still besotted with Marina. I think he saw an opportunity there to say, right, I'm the father of your child, this is my birthday, let's celebrate together, give it another go, and rekindle our marriage.
Back in the courtroom, it appears with only circumstantial evidence, Gytis could still walk free. But then a new witness takes to the stand and flips the case on its head.
This individual contacted the police and said, this guy admitted to me what he'd done. He admitted to me that he'd murdered Marina, and then he admitted that he'd set fire to the premises. And I'm prepared to give evidence to that effect.
After a grueling 2-week trial at Lincoln Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. Gytis Griskevicius is found guilty of Marina Urte's murder. He is sentenced to life with a minimum of 23 years in prison.
The guy came and gave his evidence, and obviously the jury took it on board, and ultimately, with that and with all the circumstantial evidence, unanimously convicted him of murder. He's got to spend 23 years in jail before he even becomes eligible for parole. That's a long time by anyone's book. But you know, he committed one of the most horrific crimes you could imagine. On a defenceless mother of his own child, my view is that he deserves every one of those 23 years.
But why did Gytis decide to kill Marina? On that fateful night on the 20th of May 2016.
I think it was about the fact that she was shunning his advances. Even though her new boyfriend was going to be in prison for 18 years, she still wanted to stick by him. He couldn't bear the thought of that. And I think he thought, well, if I can't have you, no one else can.
I think Gytis was jealous and had been humiliated by the new relationship, and that was his motive for the murder.
He'd taken the poor woman, battered and beaten, from one part of the flat to another, where he attacked her again, bundled her into a bath, and then drowned her with a hose. I mean, how callous and calculating can he get?
And for Marina's neighbours, her killing still haunts them to this day.
I always get the question, did you not hear anything? I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm like, so wish I did. It was in my mind for a very long time, thinking, why the hell could I not just hear anything? And then maybe we could have given her some hope. No matter how much danger I'd be in, I would have busted through the door and tried to help. 100%. If I'd have heard anything, I'd have gone straight in there and tried to help her. Even though I'd be putting myself at danger, I'd still help her, because nobody deserves to lose life like that.
And for Marina's friends and family, with the case behind them, they are slowly coming to terms with a life without her.
The biggest thing I miss about Marina is her liveliness. She was very, very positive girl, full with ideas, full with life.
I miss everything about her because I don't have anyone similar to her. She was a very good friend, and in my difficult situations, when I'm so upset and I'm so down, I know that she would be the person to turn to. She would just tell me, everything's gonna be all right. Don't worry about anything. Everything's gonna be perfect. And she had so much power in these words that I would straight away feel better. Yeah.
A loving and outgoing mother of 3.
Everybody wanted to be around her and her energy and her beauty.
She was an incredible human being and a great mother.
Is found murdered in a farmer's field.
There was numerous blunt force trauma injuries.
Cuts, lacerations, bruising throughout her body.
This poor woman was brutally attacked and murdered.
As detectives hunt the killer, they unearth dark secrets.
All the information kept leading us to think that he was trying to find a way out of this relationship.
He would drop off, break stuff. He was really controlling, he was really manipulative.
They had an argument, something happened, it went too far.
Then, new revelations turn the case on its head.
In the video, there is a male party following her into the darkness.
I had absolutely nothing to do with. What did you have nothing to do with?
And point to a predator no one saw coming.
It was definitely a very big twist.
When the news came out, he made me sick when I saw him. He looked like a monster.
Green Bay, Wisconsin is a relatively small, close-knit community where a lot of people know each other. Obviously, our claim to fame is having the Green Bay Packers in town here. So during football season, pretty much everything centers around that.
It's 100% a place that you would want to raise a family.
The crime rate in the Green Bay area is generally very low, especially when it comes to violent crime.
On a warm May afternoon in 2016, nearby Brown County Sheriff's Office gets a troubling 911 call from a local farmer.
Brown County 911, what's your emergency?
Oh, God. We just found a human body.
Is it a male or a female?
It's got long hair, but I didn't go near it. I'm about at the top of a hill just looking down on it.
The 911 call was from farmers working in a field, and they located a body.
Investigators race to the farmer's field on the outskirts of Green Bay.
The body was behind a brushy, woody area, not visible by the road itself.
It was laying face down with arms spread across the front of her head and feet towards the road. The victim was a blonde female, approximately in her 30s. Past that, we really didn't have any identifying information other than the pink wristband on her wrist. There was a distinct pattern that we found on the victim's back, which appeared to be from the sole of a shoe.
It wasn't until the body was turned that all the injuries were located.
The extent of injuries that she suffered were pretty horrific. There was trauma to her neck that would indicate possible strangulation, in addition to lacerations, bruising throughout her body. Her fingernails were damaged, indicative of defensive wounds. That tells us that she was fighting for her life.
There were nail clippings taken for the potential of any DNA from the suspect underneath her fingernails.
We were looking for anything that could be used as a weapon. However, the search of the area didn't reveal anything.
After questioning the farmer and clearing him of any suspicion, investigators try to determine how the victim ended up in his field.
The area was searched thoroughly for any clothing that may have been left behind, any other tracks, footprints.
There were a set of tire tracks that went from the driveway to where the victim's body was found and then circled back towards the driveway. The farmers work in the field were using a skidster and a four-wheeler, and they definitely didn't match those pieces of equipment.
We definitely felt like this was likely the suspect vehicle that was used to transport the body there.
As detectives continue to process the crime scene, the local sheriff's office receives another call.
Brown County Public Safety, this is Therese.
How do I go about, this missing person?
Okay, and who's missing?
My girlfriend.
What's her name?
Nicole Vanderheiden.
Our dispatch center received a phone call from a party named Doug Dietrich reporting that he did not know where his girlfriend was. And the last he had seen or heard from her was the night before.
We felt very strongly that the missing person report was going to involve the victim we had in the field.
Officers from the crime scene are dispatched to interview the caller, 34-year-old Doug Dietrich, who lived with his girlfriend, Nicole Vanderheiden.
Is Doug here? Hello. Hi. I'm here for a missing persons report.
As allowed by Wisconsin law, officers secretly film the conversation.
It was important to record the interview with Doug. Based on the victim in the field, it's always in the back of our mind that this could be some kind of domestic violence issue that happened.
Doug looked completely hungover. He had really dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I asked him why he's making this missing persons report.
I've only seen or heard from her since last night, but I'd say like, what, midnight?
Okay. Doug indicated that he and Nikki joined a group of friends out at a local establishment to participate in watching a live band.
Doug provides a telling detail when asked what Nikki was wearing.
She would have had a bracelet on.
Okay.
It was a pink bracelet for the 21 verification.
There was a wristband that the victim was wearing. So based on that information, we were quite certain that it was Nikki that we were with in the field.
As police work to confirm that the victim in the field is 31-year-old mother of 3, Nicole Vanderheiden, they learn more about her background.
Nikki was born in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Then she went to high school here. She was the most amazing, inspiring, beautiful, happy woman I have ever met in my life. She always enjoyed being around family.
After high school, Nikki attended the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, graduating in 2010.
Nikki's background included a double major in science and education. From that, she was a substitute school teacher.
Nikki was one of the hardest workers I've known. She always had 2 jobs as a substitute teacher and waitressing.
Outside of work, Nikki was dedicated to fitness.
She definitely took care of herself, and she worked out a lot. Everybody wanted to be around her and her energy and her beauty. We always complimented how beautiful she was, and she was, inside and out.
In 2005, Nikki got married and had 2 children, but the marriage ended in 2012.
Nikki was definitely a hands-on mom. I think it made her proud to be able to do that, because being a single mother is not easy.
Then, in 2015, Nikki met Doug Dietrich.
Nikki and Doug had a spark. They moved very quickly and got pregnant, and she was so excited to become a mother of 3 beautiful children. Nikki and Doug were still learning to live with one another. It was definitely a life changer.
As Nikki's boyfriend, Doug is a leading suspect in her murder. He is brought to the sheriff's office for a formal interview and informed that the body police have found is most likely Nikki.
This body that was found down the street, there's a lot of similarities.
Doug was crying, emotional, in a state of shock.
With Nikki identified as the victim, detectives asked Doug to recount the events leading up to the last time he saw her alive.
Doug reported that they had been out at a concert at the Watering Hole, which is a bar in a suburb of Green Bay.
As the night progressed, they had been consuming alcohol, and Doug had ran into some friends from high school that he had not seen in a while. And he confirmed that Nikki was mad because she saw Doug talking to another female at the Watering Hole, and this basically set her off.
From there, they got separated. He stayed at the Watering Hole with his friend Greg, and Nikki went with their friend group to the Sardine Can, which is downtown Green Bay.
Doug had last actually seen Nikki around 11:30 when she departed from the Watering Hole to the Sardine Can.
At some point, Nikki did get a hold of Doug on the phone.
What did she say? Who are you talking to? She was hysterical, drunk, and irrational, not making any sense.
Detectives ask if they can search Doug's phone for any texts he'd exchanged with Nikki.
Nikki was definitely angry texting Doug. She made mention of what bitch are you talking to? She was accusing him of cheating, telling him that he was abusive. It was actually a really big red flag for me.
Had Doug and Nikki's argument escalated into violence later that night?
It started to kind of click with everybody that they had an argument, something happened, it went too far, and Doug may be involved.
Coming up, detectives learn more about the night of the murder.
When we look at the video footage, you can see a male follower out of the gate.
We are trying to figure out what exactly happened a short distance away out of camera view.
She's not wanting to have anything to do with him and starts turning into an argument and becomes a little bit physical.
And uncover surprising new suspects.
I'm going to tell you that your timeline seems so abundantly rehearsed. The time, to be honest with us, is right now.
Before a stunning twist throws the case into turmoil.
The true killer came completely out of left field.
The Google dashboard data showed him at every single crime scene that we had.
I was very concerned who this could be. Who did this to our beloved Nikki?
After confirming that the body discovered in a farm field is 31-year-old mother of 3, Nikki Vanderheiden, police suspect that her violent murder may be linked to an angry exchange of texts she had with her boyfriend, Doug Dietrich, the night she was killed.
The text messages definitely led us to believe that if Nikki would have made it home and if she would have had contact with Doug, there would have been some sort of altercation.
When detectives pressed Doug about what happened that night, he claims that after 12:30 a.m., he and his friend Greg left the bar they'd been at to look for Nikki at another bar.
Doug describes getting the sardine can with Greg, finding that Nikki's not there, and then continuing to look around for her and being concerned.
Doug stated that he had assumed that Nikki made it home and that she would be there when he got there, so him and Greg got in their car and drove home.
With Nikki's 2 older children away for the night with their father, Doug says he got home to find the babysitter and his son, but no Nikki.
She said we haven't heard from Nikki, and I was just kind of figuring wherever she went, you know, with friends or whatever. And that's why I just, I went to bed. She did not come home at all last night after you. Not at all. There wasn't a blip or word from her.
He said that he woke up to give the baby a bottle at 6:30 in the morning, and Nikki wasn't there.
And it did not appear that Mr. Dietrich was all that concerned until later in the day, which drew our suspicions.
I did have concern as to why did it take until about 4:30 the next day to report her missing.
Following their interview with Doug, investigators obtain a sample of his DNA and release him.
The initial interview with Doug was basically to get him locked in so that we could corroborate everything that he was telling us through either physical evidence or through other statements from other witnesses.
As police set out to verify Doug's story, Nikki's family and friends learned that she's been murdered.
Knowing that Nikki was murdered and how horrific it was impacted our lives in a very horrible way. Who the hell would do this to someone with such an amazing, beautiful soul?
Reports of Nikki's murder spread shock through the community, and Nikki's family members share their grief on local news.
Heather Meyer and her family say it doesn't seem real.
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. She's been extremely up and down, numbing pain.
As Nikki's loved ones continue reeling from her death, an officer from the sheriff's office makes a crucial find.
An officer located some clothing on the side of the road, approximately a mile drive from where Nikki's body was located. Deputies were able to identify the clothing as Nikki's.
There was blood located at numerous areas in the clothing. The majority of the blood was in her pants area.
There was also a purse located which contained her ID. Her cell phone was also found at that same location. It was pretty apparent that it just got tossed out the window in a panic just by the suspect wanting to get rid of it.
As they submit Nikki's items to the lab for testing, detectives receive her autopsy report.
The primary injuries were the strangulation and trauma to the head.
They had discovered over 240 injuries to Nikki's body, including 30 to her head and face area. The last few minutes of Nikki's life would have been very painful.
There were injuries to her genitalia, which could be indicative of a sexual assault. The medical examiners did do a sexual assault exam, which included swabbing for evidence. The lab started finding a partial male profile, but they didn't have enough information to get an identification of it.
The crime lab advised us that we would need to continue to submit samples that the suspect would have touched. We're only allowed to send in so many exhibits at a time as the crime lab is very busy. We have hundreds of swabbings of Nikki's clothing, so I started off with areas where you would more likely see some touch DNA.
While they await answers from the crime lab, detectives get a hold of security video to learn what they can about Nikki's last hours.
When we first were able to take a look at the video footage from the sardine can, we were able to identify Nikki there with Doug's friends. Initially, she appeared to be having a good time, dancing around.
The later portion of the evening, we can see Nikki and her group of friends at an outside table, and you can see Nikki looking down at her phone. You can tell by her body movements that she is upset.
And eventually, she gets up and storms off through an entrance that they're sitting nearby.
What detectives see next catches their attention.
After Nikki leaves, you can see a male follow her out of the gate.
Police ask themselves, who was this man? And was he involved in Nikki's murder?
We knew that his information was going to be vital. That was the last time Nikki was seen before she was killed.
We wanted to know everything that he saw and heard because he's the last known person that we knew that saw her alive.
The day after Nikki Vanderheiden is found murdered in a farmer's field, investigators are trying to track down the man seen following her out of a bar just hours before she was killed.
In the video, there is a male party following after Nikki and walking off into the darkness. We are trying to figure out what exactly happened a short distance away out of camera view.
Officers are dispatched to interview patrons who were at the bar that night.
Based on the interviews with witnesses, we knew that male was Aaron Kalinsky.
This was a friend that they were with earlier in the night.
Police track Aaron down and bring him in for an interview.
Aaron advised us that throughout most of the night, Nikki was having a great time. And then at some point, he saw a mood shift in her. He basically had said that Nikki was trying to get a hold of Doug and that he wasn't responding.
Nikki ultimately became very angry, and that's when she left the sardine can on foot. Aaron describes following her and trying to convince her to come back and get a taxi or an Uber to go back home.
What Aaron says happened next raises detective suspicion.
But she's not wanting to have anything to do with him, and it starts turning into an argument and becomes a little bit physical.
At one point, Nikki fell to the ground on her own, and she started creating a bigger scene. Aaron advised us that she began kicking and punching at him as he was trying to help her up. He had tried to tell her, hey, we can get you home, you can come with us, but she refused.
Aaron noticed that there were people in the neighborhood seeing what was going on, so he decided to just leave it alone at that point.
Investigators wonder if there's more to the story than Aaron's telling them.
We were actually able to find those people, and they indeed remembered a female and male yelling or having a disagreement.
Continuing to watch the video, Aaron does return a very short time later, and based on the other statements from the friends that were with the group, we knew that Aaron didn't necessarily do anything wrong.
Aaron says he and his friends took an Uber home, never to see Nikki alive again.
There was video footage that showed Aaron and the other group leaving in an Uber, and there was no indication that they had come back to the area after they left.
With Aaron crossed off the list, police continue scouring the bar's security video for clues and find something unexpected.
We eventually saw Doug and Greg arrive there. Doug told us they're looking all over for Nikki, but the video is showing that he and Greg go to the bar and just start hanging out. It definitely isn't consistent with the sense of concern that he was initially talking about.
According to the surveillance video, Doug and Greg stayed at that sardine can until about 2:15 in the morning. And the fact that Doug said that they did all this looking while at the sardine can told us that he's not being entirely truthful with his efforts to locate her.
Detectives wonder if Doug had misled them about his concern for Nikki. Was there something he was hiding?
Just the mere fact that he didn't know where his girlfriend was and didn't appear to care all that much was a red flag.
With their suspicion growing, police reach out to Nikki's family to learn more about her relationship with Doug.
Nikki's mother and sister, they both voiced concerns of Doug's behavior.
I know. It's been really, really rocky during her pregnancy and their relationship. It's just a crazy relationship. He's always been very controlling. I get to ask her to get breathe her. Yeah.
Nikki's mom, as well as her sister, Heather, both say that they wouldn't be surprised if Doug was the person that was responsible for this.
Investigators search Doug's name in police records and make an alarming discovery.
Checking police records, we did locate past girlfriends that accused him of being abusive. There was at least one incident that was reported to police, but was never charged.
Police contact the woman who filed a complaint against Doug and ask her for more details.
When you would argue, it would be...
He would spit in my face.
Okay.
He would, throw stuff, break stuff. He was really controlling. He was really manipulative.
So when we saw that, that was obviously very concerning to us.
He tackled me and broke my ankle.
Despite learning that Doug's ex-girlfriend had a prior assault conviction and that Doug had never been formally charged for domestic violence, investigators remain suspicious.
At this point, we had the information that showed there could be the pattern of this abusive, aggressive behavior. And we know that Doug and Nicole had a volatile relationship, which would lead us to believe that there would be some sort of confrontation that night.
Police obtain a warrant to search Doug and Nicole's home.
During the search at Doug and Nikki's house, there were several things of concern that were located. There was blood on the floor in the garage. There was blood and dirt found in Nikki's vehicle.
There was also a set of Nike Air Jordan shoes that had a herringbone pattern on them, which was similar to what was on Nikki's back. There was also some red marks on the surface, appeared to be blood on the bottom of those shoes.
While conducting the search, Doug's neighbors from across the street approached police with a startling new discovery.
While mowing their lawn, they noticed a blood spot on the curb line of their property, and also they hit a cord of some type with their lawnmower.
We did find a large quantity of what appeared to be dried blood, as well as 2 pieces of electrical phone charging cord. There was also some clumps of blonde hair.
The blood on those items and the blood found in the road were positively identified as Nikki's. It was pretty apparent to us that that's where the altercation took place. That's where she was likely killed. When that crime scene in front of the house was located, that gave us a theory of what happened, and it continued to point us towards Doug as the suspect.
After determining that Nikki Vanderheiden was likely murdered on the street in front of the home she shared with Doug Dietrich, investigators are weighing a growing body of evidence against Doug.
This evidence that we found is kind of emboldening what we had initially thought, that Nikki got home, an argument ensued between her and Doug, and this incident took place in the street, and somehow some of that evidence would have gotten transformed into the garage and then into Nikki's vehicle.
Looking at the totality of the circumstances, we decided there was probable cause to arrest Doug at that point.
Okay. Right now I'm going to be taking you into custody, be handcuffing you. I'll explain all that to you in a bit. And transporting you down to the sheriff's department. Okay? Okay. Be cooperative with me. All right.
With Doug in custody, detectives work to solidify their case against him.
When we did the search of Nikki's car and found the blood and the dirt in the car, it was initially thought that that may have been the vehicle that was used to take Nikki to the field where she was located.
One of the things that we learned was that she had a progressive snapshot device in her vehicle, which is used for driving behavior, insurance rates. But we figured that this could help us show location from the night she was murdered.
Once we got those records back, it was found that her vehicle did not move the night of her murder. At that point, all kinds of questions are still out there. The big one being if Doug was involved in this, how Doug may have moved her. Did he use a different vehicle? Did he have help?
We knew that Doug's vehicle was not in play. It was at the watering hole all night, where it was verified on video.
One person whose name came up was Greg Matthew, who was actually driving Doug during their night out and dropped Doug off at home.
Greg was Doug's best friend, was with Doug that entire night, and we were focused on him maybe being an accessory.
Investigators bring Greg to the sheriff's office and ask him about the night of the murder.
Greg was very exact about timelines of phone calls and what they did that night.
12:15, got in my car, Nikki was calling him, yelling at him, telling him she's leaving. By the time we get back to the Sardine Can, all of our friends left. At what point we left, it was probably 2:15. Got to Doug's house probably at 2:45 and went back to my house. My parents were home. They know that I was there the rest of that night.
Greg's timeline was very consistent with Doug's, which was suspicious in nature that you usually aren't going to have your times down that path.
I'm going to tell you that your timeline seems so abundantly rehearsed, so that the time, to be honest with us, is right now.
We pressed Greg very hard, hoping that we would find some sort of inconsistencies in his story or get him to crack and finally turn on Doug.
Honestly, I had absolutely nothing to do with what? What did you have nothing to do with? Anything to do with what did you have nothing to do with? So I would like to leave.
After becoming upset with some questions, he did leave while investigators were still sitting at the interview table talking to him.
Investigators asked Greg's parents to confirm his alibi of coming straight home from Doug's shortly after 2:45 a.m.
Greg's parents told us they were only going off of what he told them. They didn't physically see him or have any firsthand knowledge.
While detectives keep Greg on the board as a potential accomplice to Doug, they receive DNA test results from the crime scene.
There was little to no sign of Doug's DNA anywhere on Nicole's body or clothing.
Doug's DNA profile is not matching up with an unknown male DNA profile that we're finding on those items.
Test results on other evidence bring even more disappointing news for investigators.
It turns out the blood on the floor of the garage was likely from a turkey that Doug had killed while hunting. The blood in Nikki's car was from one of her other children, and it was not Nikki's.
What we thought was blood on the bottom of the shoe tested inconclusive for blood.
So all those things that we thought we believed to be Nikki's blood turned out not to be. We also got location data from Doug and Greg's cell phones that corroborated their account of where they were that night, down to the times they left the bar, the route they took home, then when they got back to Doug's house, and from there.
With no concrete evidence linking Doug to Nikki's murder, authorities release him from jail.
Doug's DNA isn't really showing up where we thought it was going to be, and there's still this unknown male profile that really threw a curve at us.
Police believe that Nikki was murdered in front of her own home. But if Doug hadn't killed her, who had?
I was very concerned who this could be, who this monster could have been that did this to our beloved Nikki.
Two days after finding Nikki Vanderheiden savagely murdered, detectives hunting her killer arrested her boyfriend, Doug Dietrich. But when DNA evidence exonerates Doug, detectives turn their focus to one urgent question.
The biggest question we had to answer outside of who did this was, how did she get home? We spent countless hours watching video surveillance of every single known business between Nikki's residence and the sardine can. We had investigators watching highway camera footage, bridge camera footage to see if we could catch either her walking or crossing the river to get to that side of town.
We were running out of leads. It was frustrating at times.
Still hoping for a DNA match to the killer, investigators continue sending the crime lab samples of Nikki's clothing found at the side of the road.
We picked 10 items at a time for testing. We were looking for any items that we believe might contain more of this unknown male's DNA, hoping for a full profile. After sending several batches and not coming up with anything definitive, we ended up sending a batch that included the socks that Nikki was wearing still when her body was found.
The crime lab were able to get enough of a profile off of that sock to be able to enter it into the CODIS system.
The suspect somehow got some touch DNA on those socks.
Entered into the National DNA Database, the profile returns a hit that takes investigators by surprise.
The DNA hit that we received was that of George Stephen Birch, who was from the state of Virginia.
As far as we knew, he had no relation to anybody that was with Nikki that night or Nikki herself. All the information we had was leading us towards Doug. So once we got that DNA information, it was very surprising.
George Birch was in and out of prison on the East Coast, and at some point earlier in 2016 had moved to the Green Bay area.
So we start digging through the Green Bay Police Department records, see what we can find out about him.
George Stephen Birch was contacted by the Green Bay Police Department a few weeks after the homicide for a hit-and-run car accident. The vehicle was a Chevy S10 Blazer that was found a short distance away from where Mr. Birch was staying.
At the time, he was questioned about it and claimed that the vehicle must have been stolen.
Suspicious about the nature and timing of the supposed theft, investigators see if his Chevy Blazer could have been used to dump Nikki's body.
We ended up comparing the specs of a Chevy Blazer and the width of the tire tracks that we found in the field, and we found it to be a very near match.
Digging deeper, detectives find even more evidence connecting George to Nikki's last known movements.
We knew that he hung out at a bar that was down in that same general area of the sardine can.
We were able to identify Birch's Google account and track the location of the cell phone that Google account is associated with.
The Google dashboard data showed us road map of Mr. Birch's whereabouts that night, and he was found at every single crime scene that we had, including the farm field, Nicole and Doug's residence, the roadway where Nicole's property was found, and then back at his residence.
When we got that information, we knew we had our guy at that point.
Police track down George Birch and bring him into the sheriff's office.
When we had our contact with Mr. Birch, it was obvious that this wasn't his first contact with law enforcement. He's very cool, very calm.
The reason you're here is in reference to a homicide investigation into Nicole Vanderheiden. Okay? So, is this something that you want to talk to me about?
Sir,
What's that?
for a lawyer.
Okay.
Birch didn't provide any details or provide his version of events of anything. We still didn't necessarily have the details on how they met, why they were together.
But with DNA and other evidence firmly implicating him, police charged George Birch with Nikki's murder.
When the suspect was arrested, it was a result of actual physical evidence, and I felt so much relief that the family would never have doubt as to who did this to Nikki.
When the news came out about who did this, he made me sick when I saw him. He looked like a monster.
On February 19th, 2018, George Birch goes on trial for the murder of Nikki Vanderheiden. But when he finally takes the stand, what he says leaves the courtroom stunned.
At trial, Mr. Birch's explanation for what happened was he met Nikki at the bar. They were getting along, flirting, having a good time, and he ended up bringing her back to her house where she resides with Mr. Dietrich.
George said they were having sex in front of Nikki's house in his vehicle, and at some point someone comes out, hits him over the head with a pistol and knocks him unconscious.
The next thing that I remember was literally waking up on the ground outside the truck.
He wakes up and finds Nikki already dead on the ground and someone holding him at gunpoint.
At that point, did you know who that individual was?
Never seen him before in my life.
Do you know who that individual is now?
Now I do.
Who was it?
It was Doug Dietrich.
Investigators believe that 31-year-old Nikki Vanderheiden was brutally murdered by convicted felon George Birch. But at trial, George blindsides everyone by claiming that Doug Dietrich was the one responsible for Nikki's death.
Mr. Birch in the courtroom was very arrogant, very pompous. His demeanor was that of, I'm innocent and Doug did this.
Mr. Birch advised us that Doug ordered George to drive the body to the farm field. George said that Doug had ordered him to carry Nikki's body into the field and drop it. George then said that at one point he was able to get into a struggle with Doug, push him away, and get back into the car and take off.
He didn't come up with that story until he had a chance to look at all the evidence that was being filed against him.
George's wild allegation forces detectives to dig deeper to prove his guilt.
Part of the obstacles in this was disproving that Doug did it and show his movements from that morning and that night.
During the investigation, we learned that Nikki had given Doug a Fitbit device as a gift. So we realized that Doug was wearing that Fitbit device during all our contact with him. So we're able to review the information on the Fitbit device when he was home, going to sleep, and waking up again.
Based upon all the Google dashboard data that we had from George, we knew at what time he and Nikki arrived back to Doug and Nicole's residence. So we were able to look at Doug's Fitbit to show that at that time that George and Nicole were outside, Doug was sleeping and not, in fact, out murdering his girlfriend and disposing of the body.
Back in court, prosecutors used the location tracking evidence to demolish George's story.
The act of violence that Doug allegedly did to him did not add up with any of the other evidence that we had.
None of us bought George's story in court. We all knew it was a joke and a fairy tale made up. I think Nikki just wanted to get home to her children, and I know she fought for her life that night.
Now prosecutors put forth their theory of what really happened that night.
What I believe happened is that there was some arguments between Doug and Nikki.
I believe that Nikki did leave the sardine can pretty upset and ended up at Richard Cranium's bar, about a half a mile away.
She was intoxicated. She was by herself. She was emotional. She is very outgoing, personable person. So she'd be very easy for someone to prey upon.
At some point, she meets George Birch. They get to talking. He offers Nikki a ride home. She accepts it. They end up in front of her house. I believe at that point, George thought he was going to get some action for taking a girl home and didn't expect her to start fighting.
And that enraged Mr. Birch.
It turns into a sexual assault. At some point, he strangles her with that phone cord that was found.
She fell out of the vehicle. He continued to stomp on her back and her head, eventually killing her. And then loading her up in his vehicle, driving her to a field and disposing of her body, and then going home like nothing happened.
This poor woman was absolutely brutally attacked and murdered in front of her own home where her baby lay sleeping, and the thought of what he did to her is beyond comprehension.
After closing arguments, it didn't take very long at all for them to make a decision.
The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, George Stephen Birch, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide
for murdering Nikki Vanderheiden. George Birch is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
The true killer in this homicide came completely out of left field. I felt extreme relief for the family that someone was going to answer for this extremely heinous, horrific crime.
He's going to prison for the rest of his life. That was music to our ears, but we still knew it wasn't going to bring our Nikki back.
Nikki had 3 young children at home, one of which is a newborn. She had her entire life ahead of her and a lot of things to accomplish and a lot of friends and family that miss her.
She was an incredible human being, a great mother, and she should be recognized as that.
Despite the pain of Nikki's loss, her friends and loved ones are devoted to keeping her memory alive.
My children and I, we celebrate her life every year on May 21st, and we talk about her, and we go to the cemetery. I love to remember Nikki dancing and smiling and laughing. I loved her laugh. It was so contagious. She was always smiling. I love to remember her that way.
A wealthy commodities trader with the world at his feet.
My brother was a fun-loving guy.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money, the Cadillacs and the Rolex watches.
Is viciously gunned down.
And they shot him again and again and again.
With his wife and kids in the home at the time of the attack.
It was a very traumatic event to the family, with people with guns threatening them.
You can't dismiss the fact it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up. I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Police chased down a number of suspects.
There was a complete falling out between them. Someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
A sudden disappearance leaves everyone on edge.
There was a traitor. He disappeared off the face of the earth. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
Or one dead and one missing. Put a different spin on this type of investigation.
Every lead brings investigators to a dead end.
It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Until 30 years later.
They were holding a very big secret inside.
When the shocking truth is revealed.
Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. That's not even human. That's the devil.
Just 30 minutes outside of Chicago lies Inverness, Illinois.
Inverness is one of the wealthiest suburbs of Chicago. It's a safe, beautiful neighborhood.
Some would call it very rich, very large homes, and very few crimes are ever committed in that area.
But on April 30th, 1979, at 3:20 p.m., police receive a distressing call from a 15-year-old girl named Becky Gamari.
Her words were, "There's been a robbery. My dad's been shot." She was bleeding from the chest. The police responded immediately.
As we entered through the front door, we were met by Becky Gamari. She was crying and pointing downstairs. I went downstairs and I saw a male who was leaning back in the sofa who appeared to have numerous gunshot wounds. There was a woman who was kneeling at the feet of the victim, crying almost in hysterics.
The woman identifies herself as Jackie Gamari. She says the victim is her husband, Carl, and that she and her 3 youngest children, Bobby, Carly, and Nick, were in the home when the intruders stormed in.
Those children must have been terrified and felt so helpless. It's horrifying.
The families were taken out to the squad car so that they were secure and away from everyone.
Investigators set to work processing the crime scene, starting with the body.
I went over to the victim. I didn't find a pulse. There was a number of bullet holes in his chest with the blood basically draining down to his pants. I noticed a 9mm gun, and there were a number of 9mm casings that were strewn about the victim's feet. There was also a small .380 caliber handgun. It appeared that a 9mm was placed to make some type of a statement. This could be a staged killing. The victim, his legs were crossed at his ankles. It didn't appear to be a natural position. I went and took an inventory of what the rest of the house looked like. The bedrooms, the dresser drawers had been opened. A number of items appeared to be tossed on the floor. I could see that there were jewelry boxes that still had jewelry in them, which raises questions as to why they actually came to that residence.
Was this a legitimate robbery? Was this staged to cover something up? You can't dismiss the fact it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up. It did bring into question that they were there really to kill the victim.
We took a number of fingerprint lifts from the kitchen, the dining room, and the bedroom area.
One of the officers noticed there was no forced entry. Nobody kicked in the door or pried it.
As police continue working the scene, Carl's family receives the tragic news.
My sister called me and says, "You better get home, Carl was shot." So the whole neighborhood where the house was all cordoned off. We were told by the police he's in the house, he's dead, and they're investigating. So we were all like stunned.
When this happened, it was just a huge, huge shock, and we didn't know how to react. Disbelief and just can't be.
Carl Gamari was born in Elmwood Park, Illinois in 1944. He was the third of 4 children.
My brother Carl was a fun-loving guy. You know, he liked to go out and have fun, you know, go on dates with girls and go to parties and things like that.
When Carl was in high school, he met the love of his life.
When he started dating Jackie, he was like 18, and I think she was 17 at the time. He just knew that this was the one, and, you know, he wanted to get married, and he wanted to get married now.
Still teenagers, Carl and Jackie started a family right away.
Carl was excited to be a dad. They had 4 kids. Becky was the oldest, Bobby was the second oldest, Carly was the third daughter, and then Nick was the youngest. He was his son.
By 1977, Carl had the perfect family and the perfect job, working in finance at the Chicago Board of Trade.
Carl climbed up the ladder. He was energetic, and he loved it, and it fit his personality to a T.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money. He came to Cadillacs, Rolex watches, and things like that. He started living a high life.
From the outside, Carl's life seemed picture perfect. But now, his violent death leaves his family shattered.
He's been shot, and I was shocked. You know, no one knew anything, what's going on. I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Investigators start by interviewing Carl's family, who were also witnesses to the crime.
I took Jackie and the 2 girls out to the garage so I could get a general statement from them as to what occurred.
Jackie was crying and very upset. Becky was crying. Bobby was crying. This was the most traumatic thing children could go through. They said Carl went to work. Jackie was at home with Bobby, her 13-year-old daughter, 5-year-old Carly, and 2-year-old Nick. Around 12 or 12:30, Bobby is laying on the couch, and she's watching TV, and 2 men come in, and they have guns.
She said the 2 men were wearing stocking masks and dark clothing, and they had come in through the unlocked back door.
They point the guns at her, and they ask her, "Where's your mother?" So Bobby leads these men to the master bedroom, where Jackie is on the phone. They ask Jackie for her money. And she says, I only have $20. And they said, we're here for more than that. These men tie Bobby's hands behind her back. And then they tie up Jackie. They force them into the master bedroom closet with Carly, with baby Nick. Time is passing. Bobby said that she heard a man yelling, no, who she thought was her father, and she heard 3 banging sounds, which she believed were gunshots.
Becky came home approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon from school. She walked in through the front door, called for her mom. All she heard was crying from the master bedroom. At that time, she found them banging on the closet door to be let out.
Once Becky opens up the closet doors, Bobby went directly down to the basement, and Bobby saw her father's bloody, bullet-ridden body laying on that couch. It is difficult to imagine how terrifying this must have been.
While the family lived through an extremely traumatic ordeal, police are hopeful that with their help, they can catch Carl's killers.
Jackie and Bobby said that the suspects had actually pulled up their masks, so they had their face exposed to them.
Jackie described the first suspect as a male white, mid to late 20s to 30s, tall, dark-haired, and also had a mustache. The second suspect was shorter than the first, slightly heavier, was a white male, but had a pale complexion and facial hair.
Bobby and Jackie were able to do composites of the faces they saw. I think there was a lot of hope somebody's going to recognize these individuals.
When we heard about the sketch, we thought that would be it. They'd be able to find him.
I was hoping to get the information out as quickly as possible with the suspect's description, so that if someone was possibly stopped or seen within the general area, a patrol vehicle could have stopped them.
In Inverness, where crime is virtually non-existent, police believe there is more to this case than meets the eye.
It appeared to be a staged crime. It could be someone who owed money to someone and being shot for that, a jealous boyfriend. It could be a number of different things. You can't close your mind to any possibility at that point in time.
Coming up, investigators uncover sordid secrets.
He might have had some associates who might have been involved with the mob. It definitely raised a red flag.
The killers evade detectives until an unexpected witness steps forward.
You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to kill Carl.
To reveal a dark and twisted plot no one predicted.
As soon as they knew how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
That was the missing key.
Police are investigating the murder of commodities trader and father of 4, Carl Gamari. His wife and young family were at home at the time of the terrifying attack.
Jackie and the 2 girls were mostly in shock. They were completely overwhelmed by what was happening.
Jackie and Bobby saw the gunman. Armed with their description, officers go door to door looking for witnesses.
One of the neighbors saw 2 men coming from the Gramaris through her yard, and she thought one of them was carrying like a jewel bag. After that neighbor pointed out where she saw the 2 men walking through her yard, the detectives went back and followed that path. They had found a cigarette butt that still had ash on it by her driveway.
That cigarette butt was collected by the State Police Crime Lab, but in 1979 there was no DNA, so there really wasn't much of the evidence that could be collected off of that cigarette butt.
More witnesses come forward to help police trace the suspect's movements.
There was a woman who was in her car around the time that this incident took place. She stated that she saw a beater-type gray car parked on the side of the street. When she returned approximately 3 o'clock or so, she said that she saw the vehicle oncoming towards her. She said that the driver was a white male, the second passenger in the front, was a white male, but he was trying to slump down in the seat. In her words, she thought he was trying to hide himself.
The neighbor who saw that vehicle coming towards her with the two men was also able to do a composite.
It's similar to the one Jackie and Bobby gave police.
Composites are very, very useful. You can put them in the newspaper, you can get them on the news, you can get them out there for people, other agencies, to see if anybody could identify them as possible suspects. So after the canvass was conducted, they then did a sweep of the area between the victim's house and where this car was observed to see if they could find any evidence. They also discovered tire impressions and some footwear impressions that were in the mud there where the car had been parked.
Back at the crime scene, investigators get an unexpected visitor.
I noticed someone approached me and he pulled out his credentials as being a Chicago police officer and told his name was Sam Greco. Sam said that he was a family friend. The girls knew Sam. They felt comfortable around him.
He said that he had been called by the daughter, that something had happened, so he was coming out to see what assistance he could lend.
On the day of the murder, Becky made 2 phone calls. She did call 911. Her next call was to Sam, to tell him what had taken place.
Sam originally arrived up the scene about an hour after the initial call. He had advised him that he had been on the phone with Jackie. This was about 12:30 in the afternoon, and that during their conversation, she said somebody was there, and he heard some voices in the background, and then the call was disconnected. So he had offered to give them his phone records so they could try to establish a timeline of when that occurred.
Based on the time of the phone call, police believe the gunman arrived at 12:30 p.m. and left by 3 that afternoon. They spent over 2 hours in the home, a detail that puzzles the investigators.
They spent so much time in the house, which is not normal. Home invaders usually come in, take care of business, and leave. They don't sit around. Second, the amount of items that were left behind didn't indicate that this was a straight-up home invasion.
My question was whether or not they knew that Carl Gamari was coming home at that point in time, and why did they kill him?
Who did it and why? And why my brother? What did he do that he deserved to have his life snuffed away and taken away? We had no idea who it could be.
In their search for answers, detectives turn back to Carl's wife, Jackie.
Anytime you're investigating a murder within a family, you have to look at the surviving spouse. It was clear that Jackie hadn't been the one to shoot Carl. 2 armed invaders came into their house and locked him in the closet. It was very traumatic to the kids and to Jackie. To have all of a sudden their peaceful day broken down with people with guns and then threatening them and not letting them move around the house, not knowing what was going to happen next.
They were absolutely terrified. Even after the suspects had left, it was difficult to get them to concentrate on making a statement. Jackie was crying, upset.
When detectives ask Jackie about her relationship with Carl, she tells them she loved him and that he was her high school sweetheart. But what she reveals about her marriage surprises investigators.
Carl and Jackie had a rather unorthodox situation at times. Over the years, they both had affairs, and they would bring their lovers home.
When you get information like that, that's an important thing to follow up on and look further to see if that has anything to do with what occurred here.
Had the couple's infidelities led to Carl's murder?
You have to look at that as a possibility.
It definitely raised a red flag.
It was definitely shocking.
Detectives investigating the cold-blooded murder of Carl Gamari have learned he and his wife, Jackie, had both been unfaithful.
That's a big red flag and needs to be looked at very thoroughly.
Jackie tells police they had recently agreed to work on their marriage.
They seemed to be getting better as you got into 1979. They were trying to work it out.
They went on a romantic vacation. They were making a plan to do another big trip to Africa. They were buying a new house, and they would tell friends that, yeah, things are getting back together for us. We're going to make an effort to make this work, especially because of the kids.
A year before the murder, the couple had even decided to renew their vows.
We as a family thought, wow, this is nice. This is really nice to see, that they wanted to get together and they have us there witness the renewing of their vows.
They were like two lovebirds. He was gleaming from ear to ear, and so was Jackie, and they seemed like a wonderful couple.
While Jackie was also a victim in this crime, detectives still need to know if she'd have anything to gain financially from Carl's death.
It was learned that there was only about a $30,000 life insurance policy. Carl had never signed a will, which ties it up in court, and it could be 7 years before you see any of the financial gain from this. And so this kind of cleared Jackie of being in the spotlight of the investigation.
Investigators consider whether Carl and Jackie's renewed marriage could have driven one of their former lovers to murder. When they ask Jackie who she had an affair with, her answer is surprising.
Jackie and Sam Greco had an affair.
She said that she had dated Sam for quite some time, but that she had broken off the relationship with Sam to recommit to her marriage with Carl.
Jackie had said when she became pregnant with Nick, she stopped seeing Sam.
Detectives need to know, was Sam a jealous ex? Could he have killed Carl to have Jackie to himself?
Sam was interviewed once on the phone and then again in person. He had met Jackie at a wedding, and he was doing some private investigative work, and Jackie had hired him to follow Carl to see if he was having an affair. There was an indication from Sam's investigation that Carl was having an affair.
And that ultimately led to them initiating a relationship.
Sam also told the investigators that he and Jackie had been lovers, but they were now just friends.
Sam denied any involvement with this case.
They took his phone records, fingerprinted them, and they interviewed individuals associated with Sam.
He was considered a hero within the Chicago Police Department. The police back then still investigated him as much as they could.
The investigators ruled him out as not being involved in this.
With Sam eliminated from the investigation, detectives next look at the woman with whom Carl had been having an affair.
Gail Kayak was someone whom Carl had actually hired and worked with.
When Gail was interviewed, her description was it was kind of two adults having some fun together. It was nothing serious. She knew it was going nowhere. She knew Carl was married.
Gail tells investigators she and Carl broke things off about a year ago and that there wasn't any animosity between them.
She ended up, after the relationship was over between her and Carl, had a boyfriend, got pregnant. Given the affair had been over for a year, it just made really no sense that she would be involved in this in any way.
Just when detectives think they've hit another dead end, Gail gives them a stunning new lead. She says they need to speak to Carl's former friend and colleague, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser was one of the closer people to Carl at the Board of Trade. They had worked together there for a while. They socialized.
Gail claims Ned not only knew about her affair with Carl, but told Jackie about it.
Carl and Ned were friends. Carl would use his apartment to be with his girlfriend. Ned ultimately got upset with Carl, told Jackie that Carl was using his place to be with his girlfriend. Once Carl found out that Ned was the one who told Jackie about Gail, that soured the relationship.
Gail also tells police Ned had a dark reputation.
She had rumored that he had ties to organized crime. Whenever you're dealing with people with money and investment and all, there's always a possibility that someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
Had Carl and Ned fallen out over money? Had Ned put out a hit on his former friend?
You always look at the big picture. Business dealings with Ned, him betraying Carl to Jackie about using his place, Ned having some possible mob connections. I think you got to look at everything. You have to see what's there. Where does that lead you? Is this a person who has a reason to kill Carl?
Police are following a tip that the murder of successful trader Carl Gamari may have been a targeted hit, one organized by his former friend and co-worker, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser might have been, quote-unquote, involved with the mob.
During the 1970s, Chicago was very much involved with the criminal network of the mob, and a number of people wound up dead every year.
Organized crime had a hand in gambling. From information obtained from co-workers and people that knew Carl, he gambled at the Board of Trade, he would gamble outside. Well, if individuals are gambling like that, then chances are they would cross paths with organized crime people.
5 days after the homicide, Ned is brought in for an interview. Police ask about his friendship and working relationship with Carl.
The relationship with Ned and Kaiser and Carl and the family was an extensive, involved one. They had known each other for approximately 9 years, and at one point, when Ned was going through a divorce, they actually let him move into their house.
Ned says that's why he had a hard time keeping Carl's affair secret.
Ned had told investigators that the reason he came forward to Jackie was because he was friends with both of them, and he just felt that Jackie was being mistreated by the way Carl was acting and needed to correct it.
Detectives ask Ned if Carl was indebted to him or if they had any conflict about money.
Ned denied ever having any kind of a fight with Carl. Ned was asked if he had any involvement, if he knew anything about Carl's murder, and he denied having any direct knowledge. There was nothing that anyone could dig up that would say Ned was responsible for Carl's death.
The investigators took a very hard look at him to see if there was any way that he could have committed this crime. And they were able to rule him out. There was no evidence connecting him to the murder of Carl Gamari.
Investigators are forced to let Ned go.
The police talked to everyone that they possibly could. If they talked to one person and that person mentioned other people, they went and talked to those people as well. And then it gets to a point where there's just no other leads to pursue at that time. So the police are essentially waiting for new information.
Authorities once again turn to the public in an attempt to find the men who killed Carl and terrorized his family.
Their composites are very critical in our ongoing investigation in identifying the shooters.
I remember cutting out all the headlines and all that. Boy, something's going to be recognized with the sketch and something's going to happen with this and come about from it. But days would go on and nothing.
When the sketches were released, there wasn't a lot of information that came in. Nothing substantial at all.
Detectives hope that the autopsy report will provide a crucial new lead.
Carl had been shot 6 times. The fatal wound had penetrated his chest into his heart and severed the aorta. When you have multiple shots like that from 2 different guns, it's apparent that their intent was to kill him.
And they shot him again and again and again and again, a total of 6 times.
Since the medical examiner didn't find any defense wounds on Carl, there is no physical evidence on his body to link to the perpetrators. Frustration grows when detectives get the report on the fingerprints found at the crime scene.
There were no known matches of any of those latent fingerprints. They had no real suspects.
Didn't seem like anybody was going to be arrested for this.
With the killer still on the loose, the town of Inverness is on edge, while Carl's family lives in fear.
A couple of days after the original murder, someone had put a threatening note in the mailbox. Jackie then went to the police and said she was being threatened, and that was her concern for her safety.
When I found that out, I was very disturbed. I was concerned about Jackie and the kids. Somebody wanted my brother killed.
2 weeks after the murder, police make a disturbing discovery.
It came to the attention of the initial investigators that there was a trader, worked at the Chicago Board of Trade, had just disappeared. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
Detectives learn his name is Artie Jones, and he's one of Carl's business associates.
Art Jones knew Carl. There may have been some money involved between the two of them.
No one knew what happened to him. He left for work, drove into the city, and was never heard from again.
Could the two cases be connected?
Now put a new light, a new focus with two traders in close proximity, one dead and one missing. Put a different spin on this type of investigation.
At that point in time, when we heard the news and it was all over the papers, that we thought, wow, now we know there's something going on at the Board of Trade.
When you had Carl, who was killed and being part of Board of Trade, and then you have Artie, who disappears after going to work at the Board of Trade, those don't happen often.
And when Artie Jones happened, that was very concerning. It was, we wanted to find out, okay, who's after Artie and who's after Carl, if there was somebody, in fact, after both of them.
Two weeks after Carl Gamari's murder, his coworker, Artie Jones, has vanished. Detectives are hunting for a potential connection between the two cases.
Through the Highland Park investigation of Artie, they interviewed his wife, and she said that since the murder of Carl, he had become very edgy. He was very secretive about going out to meet some people for business at that time and then never coming back. It just heightened that concern she had about the two being related.
There was just no trace of him. They ran credit checks, they did phone records. They had absolutely nothing of where this individual may have gone or why he disappeared.
They located his vehicle near O'Hare Airport.
No reason why it was there, no rhyme. Couldn't put him on an airplane. There was just nothing. He was gone.
That investigation was rather lengthy, and they never did locate him. And eventually, his wife had him declared dead. It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Carl's family continues to push for answers.
I was persistent. I would call. I wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, from the detectives. What's going on? What's the next step? What are you looking at? Months and months and months turned into a year turned into 2 years. Then you kind of lost faith a little bit.
Carl's loved ones try to cope with the terrible realization that his killers may never be found.
The investigation wasn't turning up anything. They broadcasted and showed those pictures of the two men for a long time. No one knew anything. The case is considered a cold case.
30 years later, the case is reopened.
Detectives Mike Kirby and Bill Stutzman took over that investigation, gave it new life. These were people who had investigated, hundreds of violent crimes in their careers.
I had spent 9.5 years on a homicide task force. So this was my first actual cold case.
We were told to look at this case from 30 years ago. Right away, you're like, 30 years? Who's even going to be alive from back then that we could talk to? But when we sat down and we compiled our plan of action, people we wanted to talk to, we became extremely excited about the possibility of this being solved.
As the new detectives start digging into the cold case, they are confronted with a daunting problem.
Barrington Police Department had 2 floods in their basement where their evidence was kept. These floods basically contaminated any of the evidence, ruling it unusable. Any DNA we might have was gone.
That's a major blow in an investigation. Most cold cases nowadays are solved through forensic evidence. We had none of that.
Then, in 2011, a stunning turn of events reignites the investigation.
We get a phone call. It was shocking to us.
Artie Jones had been located, living under an assumed name in Las Vegas, part of a fraud investigation by the federal government, and located him. We were extremely shocked that he was alive.
Investigators fly to Nevada to interview Artie Jones about Carl's murder.
Well, the first thing we wanted to know was what relationship did Artie Jones have at all with Carl? Did they have any kind of business transaction? He claimed he didn't even know. So then we focused on why did he disappear then. When we talked to Mr. Jones, he said that he was having financial problems. He didn't like his job. He didn't like his life. He was unhappy with his marriage. So he just faked his disappearance. And that became very clear that he had staged all this by planting the car by the airport. The two had no connection. The Ghamari murder and his disappearance were not related.
With the Artie Jones mystery solved, detectives are again left with no leads.
What we decided to do was to work this like it was a fresh case and just start from the beginning with no preconceived notions, no thoughts on where we were going to go with it.
Bill Stutzman and Mike Kirby re-interviewed everyone who had been interviewed that they could find back in 1979 and 80, and one of the people they interviewed was Jackie's sister, Tootsie. When police interviewed Tootsie the night of Carl's murder, she told them on the morning of April 30th, Jackie called Tootsie and told her to come over that day. And if Tootsie had come that day, I don't know if she would have been another victim.
Detectives bring Jackie's sister, Tootsie, in for an interview. As they question her, she makes a jaw-dropping revelation.
She said, I've been ridden with guilt throughout the years. I've seen what it did to the kids, what it did to his family. I can only be truthful about this. I can only tell you what was told to me.
Tootsie was having ulcers after the murder of Carl. She was holding a very big secret inside.
It troubled her to keep this secret for so long. She just realized, I believe, that it was the right thing to do, and that's what she always wanted to do.
And she proceeded to tell us about 2 months prior to the murder that Jackie had said, I don't love Carl anymore. I don't want to be with him. This is the time when Jackie and Carl were getting back together.
Jackie had supposedly stopped the affair with Sam Greco.
Based on what we learned, that was not the truth. Her affair still continued.
It was very shocking. It gives you a different light view of Jackie, yes, as a person and the type of individual she is.
What Tootsie says next leaves investigators stunned.
Jackie had told her of a plan that she had with Sam.
Jackie said to Tootsie, we've found a way to get rid of Carl. We're going to make it look like a home invasion. Some men are going to come in, they're going to tie me up, and they're going to wait for Carl to come home and kill him.
Tootsie couldn't believe what her sister was saying to her, and they just kind of ended the conversation with Tootsie saying, Jackie, you don't have to do that, divorce him. Just divorce him. And Jackie would reply, if I divorce him, then I don't get all the money.
Jackie had told her how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
It seemed almost mind-blowing to think that Jackie could be involved in such a crime as to expose her daughters and her infant to their father getting killed in the home.
Investigators tell Tootsie they'll need more than just her word to lay charges.
They decided to ask her if she would be willing to record conversations with her sister, Jackie. At first, Tootsie said no, she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to hurt Jackie.
We had emphasized with her that, no, we're not saying Jackie physically killed Carl, but she was part of a plan in which Carl was killed. And we had said, we're asking you to put an open-ended statement to her and see how she responds. She agreed to do it.
That was the missing key to make this case go forward.
More than 30 years after the cold-blooded killing of father of four, Carl Gamari, police learn his wife Jackie plotted his murder with her former lover, Sam Greco. But investigators need hard evidence to arrest her. They convince Jackie's sister, Tootsie, to record a conversation.
Hi, Jackie.
How you doing?
I'm not doing good, honey. The police have been here about Carl, and they've been asking me a lot of questions. They're saying I might have to go in front of the grand jury. I don't know if you remember what you told me.
I do. Are you going to do that, though, to me?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to.
Oh, my God. You just tell him that I wish he was dead. Don't tell him I said that, please.
They already know, Jackie. You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to break in and tie you up and put you in the closet and then kill Carl. You
got to help me, Tootsie. I can't go to jail. You got to help me.
I can't lie. I can't lie.
Did you just tell them you're all confused and don't remember?
But they know I remember. They know I do.
Those recorded conversations are devastating.
Jackie saying, "Can you lie for me? Can't you say you forget?" There was truth to what Tootsie was saying. And that's why Jackie wanted to lie for her. That was very damaging evidence.
Those recordings were all that were needed to have an arrest warrant issued.
Police bring Jackie down to the station.
We did not tell her she was under arrest, but she was not going anywhere. We had the arrest warrant. During the course of the interview, not only did we tell her, we talked to Tootsie, who told us about their conversation. We played portions for Jackie.
And I don't do that stuff, and that's enough to put me away. What am I supposed to say when they ask me why I said that to you? What am I supposed to say?
That I can't answer. I don't know. Maybe you didn't mean to tell me, but you did.
What should I do?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
You're my sister, but you're a witness against me. Your testimony is enough to put me away. I'm going to go to jail.
Confronted by her own words, Jackie tries to put the blame on her former lover, Sam.
Because she wanted to be able to say, yes, okay, early on, I said, let's do this. But then I backed out. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So therefore, I'm not guilty of Carl's murder.
There are so many things Jackie did that tells you what kind of a person she is. She wanted to be with Sam. She didn't want to be with Carl.
After the murder, Sam and Jackie married a few months later.
Several years later, Sam and Jackie were divorced. We continued a full-force investigation into Sam Greco's involvement, as also pursuing the two shooters. And before we could gain enough evidence to charge him, he passed away from his medical conditions.
On March 27th, 2013, Jackie alone is charged with the first-degree murder of her husband, Carl Gamari.
Jackie was the true monster. Without Jackie, this crime never would have happened.
In 2016, a jury finds Jackie guilty, but the verdict is overturned on appeal. Prosecutors offer Jackie a deal. She pleads guilty to murder and is sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Justice finally was served. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it.
She was a true sociopath. And not just for taking Carl's life, but because of what she did to her children. She chose to have her children be victims of this traumatic event just for her own selfish needs to get rid of her husband.
A woman that involves her own children in a scheme, in a plan, in a plot to have their father murdered, her husband murdered. I don't know, if you ask me, that's not even human. That's the devil.
4 decades after the murder, police are still searching for the gunman.
This remains an open and active investigation. It's never going to stop. If there's any new information, the police are going to follow up on it. No matter how long those shooters live and how much time passes, They can never stop looking over their shoulder.
My brother was a good guy. He was very determined to succeed in anything he did. To see how he would have been when his children got older would have been a wonderful thing to happen, and I'm sure he would have loved it.
Who knows how our lives would have been, you know. A lot of missed opportunities, a lot of things that never happened. I lost a brother and, you know, somebody to look up to and somebody to experience life with, you know, the rest of the way. I miss Carl a lot.
About quarter to midnight on the 18th of April, the police got a call from a woman saying that she was in Chiltwell Street in Glastonbury and that she had stabbed her lodger.
Step away, step away, step away, step away now.
When they arrived, there was a man at the bottom of the stairs. He was unconscious.
Kick on the floor, turn over.
In an adjacent room was Dawn Lewis, who also had injuries, quite hysterical at that point.
Friend. Okay, I've got colleagues with him, just calm down. Okay, okay.
After the paramedics and the police had tried to give as much intervention as they could, it was apparent they weren't going to be able to save his life and he was pronounced dead at the scene.
The man is 61-year-old Glenn Richards, who has lived with Dawn Lewis as her lodger for the last 8 months.
I called the ambulance. Want you here, okay?
Right.
It took ages.
Okay.
Alright, it's okay.
Bring your other hand to the small of your back.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the outset, on that initial phone call, she's saying, I was attacked by Glenn, she's got the injuries, and I've attacked Glenn, but I was scared. Is Dawn telling us the truth? Am I dealing with a murder or a self-defense killing?
Dawn was definitely into the hippie vibe. She was bright, bubbly, very much an extrovert. She liked to socialise.
In 2019, Dawn Lewis, aged 50, moves into her dream home, a large country cottage in Glastonbury, Somerset.
She was very well known in Glastonbury. She was described by some as a Glastonburian, which is someone who embraces the alternative lifestyle that Glastonbury is widely associated for.
Dawn had a very tight friendship group in Glastonbury, especially around the Chiltwell Street area. They're very, very friendly people that embraced anybody that joined that community, it would seem. So, yeah, it's a typical street where if you're short of a bag of sugar, you go and ask your neighbour and your neighbour will give it to you.
I don't remember when I met Dawn first, but basically you'd meet on the street, just outside, and yeah, just became friends. We had an open door policy here.
We were actually going back and forth in between houses.
Dawn is loud, bubbly, likeable, in your face, can be too much. Dawn wants to be the life and soul of the party at all things, so she's the polar opposite of Glenn.
Dawn and Glenn first met while working in a charity shop.
Dawn and Glenn had their differences, but I think they also had quite a lot in common. They were best of friends and spent a lot of time together walking the dog. Dawn helped him in everyday life, and Glenn as well is a helping person.
He was very introverted and quite the opposite to Dawn in a lot of ways. Didn't live an exciting life, wanted to live a quiet life, didn't socialise much. Some may say dull and boring, but I think that was the type of life that he wanted to lead at that time.
Dawn being very outgoing, free-spirited. Apparently she was flirtatious. She had been in same-sex relationships, but later disclosed she was bisexual. Then we look at Glenn, straight, single man, may have picked up signals which weren't there. That will be something that only those two would have known.
It always came across that they were very supportive of each other, which is the only thing you can get from a really good friendship. I think that Glenn tried to keep her on an even keel. I think he was probably quite a reasonably good influence on her.
In 2021, Dawn invites Glenn to move in with her as her tenant.
I personally think that the only reason he moved in is because he thought he was helping her out, as he's been doing throughout the years that they've known one another.
I can only assume that he gave up a secure tenancy to help her, because it was cash in her pocket. I could understand the benefits Dawn got from it, but I never understood the benefits that Glenn got from it.
Dawn owned the house. She had purchased the house with a previous partner, and she had taken that house on herself. Quite a big house for one person and a dog, so at some point in the past she split the upper level into a separate part of accommodation with locked doors to her part of the premises, and any lodgers would have their own part of the premises. There were separate living rooms, separate bathrooms, separate bedrooms. Glenn found it more difficult to make friends, quite solitary at times, but Dawn, through their friendship, introduced him to other people as well, so he could build himself a life in Glastonbury.
All we knew about Glenn really is what Dawn told us. It was very hard to get any sort of conversation from him. And trust me, I tried. Really tried. He was just very, very pleasant. You just couldn't get to know him.
Glenn would answer your questions. Yes would be the answer, but then he wouldn't elaborate on it anymore. He was always seemed to be pretty subdued.
Dawn would always invite him in. Oh, can I bring Glenn? Don't want to leave him on his own. So I was never sure whether Glenn actually wanted to go to these things. He would follow her like a puppy half the time. It's literally Dawn, Glenn.
For somebody like Glenn, who might want a new start in life, he might find value in somebody like Dawn, who has confidence, who will take risks on his behalf to help him come out of his shell. And conversely, somebody like Dawn, he can help her be a bit more introspective and a bit more down to earth. But at the same time, it's about how they respect each other's differences and personalities.
But within just a few months, Glenn's reclusive nature takes its toll on the friendship.
It feels like Glenn is getting on a bit. He's getting older. He wants to move away from that lifestyle, whereas Dawn seems to be very much trapped in that space. And I think over time that's causing a rift between them, it's causing irritation. You know, Dawn is irritated that Glenn's not her partner in crime as he used to be. Glenn's irritated about the noise and the constant disturbances. So you can see how trouble might be brewing.
After being friends for over a decade, Glenn moved into Dawn's country cottage in Glastonbury towards the end of 2021, and I think that's when their relationship really started to deteriorate.
It's quite unusual to find close platonic relationships, so it's very possible that they might have overestimated their connection and they might have initially overvalued their relationship. And of course, when they were in each other's space and living together, little issues can lead to arguments, and over time can become quite problematic.
Dawn Lewis did use Glenn to her advantage when she wanted some work doing, gardening, the rubbish taken out, the dog walking. She would look to Glenn to assist her with that. There was occasions where she banned him from using the shower except for one day a week, banned him from using the washing machine except for a particular day.
So in every coercive controlling relationship there are rules and regulations, because that person is holding the power, and then if you breach the rules and regulations there will be a consequence in some way, shape or form. And this is quite clear that Dawn was taking full advantage of that power and control over Glenn, who was at that point in a vulnerable situation. He's become submissive to her, so to speak, you know, because it was her property.
With the friendship under such strain, Dawn loses Glenn as the stabilizing influence on her life.
It seemed to me that Dawn was going downhill. She seemed to be forever drinking, and she was getting more out of control.
Patricia was still a little more acceptant of her. I became a little more weary because of some of the things she would do. Kind of catch her in those porcupines that she would tell, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, she told you one thing and then told me something else, and I started backing away, going, not interested in that type of friendship anymore.
You could see she was getting agitated, and you think, that's over and above normal behaviour. George and I have seen Dawn flip on a switch. It made you see her in a new light. At one point, she flipped at George and got right up in his face, and I thought, where did that come from? And kind of from then onwards, you're very wary of someone that does that, behaves aggressively and that, just switches.
If you came between Dawn and her obsession, I don't think my front door would have slowed her down. I had seen her get to the point of anger that even I got scared.
And what we saw was...
Scary.
Scary.
Now, of course, this could have just been a one-off incident where she lost her temper in an extreme situation, but it could potentially indicate a pattern. So maybe Dawn isn't everything that meets the eye. Maybe she's actually more violent and potentially aggressive than she likes to portray herself.
By March 2022, Dawn wants to move on.
I think basically Glenn may have been an inconvenience. She got bored. She got bored with it.
She was wanting to move him out so she could bring someone else in. Someone that may have fit her scenario in her head that she needed to do what she needed to do.
She got her sights set on something else.
Whilst Glenn was living in the house as a lodger, Dawn would have a lot of friends, very much an open door sort of policy, like it was in many houses in that street.
One friend, who is well known amongst the neighbours, starts to spend more and more time at Dawn's cottage.
Our friend would come down here to party, so we'd all be at the party group. And Dawn was part of that. Because of Dawn's behaviour, our group had become more fractured to a level that I didn't want to even cross her in the street. So when our friend did come down, it was a case of we'd be here and he would then go to see the other group members on his own.
She paraded him up and down the high street going, oh, my new boyfriend.
It is what she called him. I think she was putting a stamp on him.
Dawn announces there is a new man in her life, and she lets it be known that Glenn's days at the cottage are numbered.
I know for a fact, because he told me, that she'd asked him to move in, that she was getting rid of Glenn and wanted him to move in.
But Glenn definitely didn't want to leave because he was trying to get his life where he wanted it to go.
I think maybe even possibly he thought, I made a mistake. She was supposed to be my friend. She told me that this would work.
Now frozen out of Dawn's life, Glenn has nobody else to turn to and nowhere else to go.
Dawn wanted him out. She made that perfectly clear. Glenn wanted to stay and he refused to leave. Glenn would regularly complain about the noise that Dawn was making, whether that was just her general brashness, her general loudness, throwing parties, socialising. I think it was just the world that she lived that Glenn wasn't a part of. In one text, Glenn described Dawn as a grade 1 narcissist. He would also regularly tell her that he wasn't a threat, but he wasn't moving out and he wasn't going anywhere.
Easter bank holiday weekend. The once supportive friendship hits rock bottom.
Dawn's back garden was very long, 100-odd feet up towards Glastonbury Tor, and towards the top of that garden was a teepee that she used to use to entertain guests. Glenn's bedroom at the top of the house did overlook the back garden. You could hear what was going on at the top of the garden from Glenn's bedroom.
I remember one evening, our friend was going there, and there was a noise. Even I could hear the noise.
We do know that Glenn sent Dawn a message asking them respectively to be a bit quiet because it was disturbing him, and he also interpreted the noise they were making as a sexual act. And the conversation he had with Dawn was that she was being disrespectful to him, making that sort of noise in the garden underneath his bedroom window. I'm pretty confident in saying that that probably instilled a little bit of rage in him.
When we look at Glenn and with Dawn, he might have just been jealous of her, even just friendships with anybody else, let alone if there was anything intimate between them, which we will never know. Glenn wasn't needed as much as he was before. He wasn't that calming influence now. Now Dawn has got somebody else.
The following evening, Dawn turns to a female friend, claiming what is truly happening behind closed doors.
Dawn had texted her to say she was really worried about Glenn. I'm scared of Glenn. He's really scaring me. I've got my doors locked. Then my dog is behaving in a strange way, and Glenn's pacing around like a caged animal.
Dawn said that she'd become increasingly concerned about Glenn's, she described it as erratic and obsessive behaviour. She described where Glenn was caught wearing her underwear. Dawn claims that Glenn deliberately walked in on her while she was having sex.
We do know that Dawn actually said to Glenn, to stop watching me shower. Why was Glenn watching her have a shower? Was the door left open to the bathroom for him to sort of look at her having a shower? Or did he sort of impose himself and push the door open to watch her having a shower? So obviously there's lots of mixed signals going on with the relationship. This is just an explosion waiting to happen.
These are things that Dawn was saying was happening within the privacy of her own home. By all accounts, there was no boundaries in terms of Glenn's mind, and Dawn had got to the stage where she was actually telling people she'd become frightened of him. I think anyone who heard her tell that story would have shared her concern, and that was one of the reasons she says she wanted him out of her cottage.
But Dawn says despite all this, Glenn is still stubbornly refusing to leave.
He was adamant that, no, I'm not going anywhere. I haven't done anything wrong. There's no reason that you can just simply kick me out. And that frustrated her more because there was no way that she could just say, get out, you have to leave. Because he was there, he was paying the rent.
When we dig a bit deeper into exactly what the tensions were between Dawn and Glenn, we have Dawn's perspective, and she claims that he was committing some pretty odd and creepy behaviour, and there might have been, to her, some red flags of potential sexually predatory behaviour. From Glenn's perspective, he perhaps felt that she was leading him on to a degree, so harbouring this kind of resentment over time is very dangerous.
Is the patient breathing? Hello, hello. Hello, is the patient breathing?
No, I don't know. I haven't touched him. He's a lodger. I wanted him out. He stabbed me in the leg. I took the knife off him. I stabbed him.
David, close. Back close.
The first people that get there, it's that situation you never want to experience as a police officer. Then emotions will start, by their very nature, running wild. Those police officers attending that night will go into professional mode, I need to save this man's life.
Right, move back. Officer the taser, step away, step away now, step away.
Glenn was at the bottom of the stairs, on the floor, he was unconscious.
Move backwards. Get on the floor, turn over. Right, put your hands out. Do not make any sudden movements, do you understand? We're doing it now.
They set about giving him the best first aid they can. Dawn Lewis, who also had injuries and quite hysterical at that point.
Stay on the floor.
Right, that's fine, but check him. I'm wounded, but I'm not dead.
Okay, I've got colleagues with him, just calm down.
Okay.
Don't make any sudden movements.
Okay, just sort him out.
All right, stay still.
It was bloody, it was frantic. Dawn was laying on the floor, and she was actually screaming
And the fact that she referred to him as a friend showed that there was still maybe a feeling of affection there.
We've got one male has been confirmed stabbed, he's unconscious.
The officers that initially attended were seen clearly to be treating stab wounds on his torso. It became quite clear that Glenn was in a critical condition and they wanted to give life-saving treatment there and then. So Glenn was taken out onto the street and treated on the pavement outside. This person is in their potentially in their last gasps of life, and whether they live or die is somewhat dependent on what you do at that stage. Also, dealing with the suspect still in the premises, injuries to her as well. There's so much going through these officers' minds.
Right, listen, I'm going to approach you, okay? Don't make any sudden movements.
No, love, I'm not. I called the ambulance and want you here, okay?
Right.
Right, it's okay.
Bring your other hand to the small of your back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, at this moment in time, you're under arrest for GBH with intent. You don't have to say anything, but the main defence, if you do not mention when questioned something which later on in court, anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Despite the emergency service's best efforts, Glenn Richards is pronounced dead at the scene.
My job is to come in the next day and go to be briefed on the case, what we knew so far, and what needed doing afterwards. Ultimately, though, in my role, I want to understand exactly what's happened within that scene as early as possible, to see how we can best interpret that scene to either disprove or prove that the victim was murdered, how, with what, and by who.
Officers waste no time and cordon off her home as a crime scene.
They had literally shut off the street in front of our house. You immediately go, what the heck's going on? You go out and the police are going, no, get back in your house, you can't come out.
It was just police walking up and down the road, and we didn't have a clue what had happened.
It's something you would not expect. No, you never expect something like that.
When we first arrived as the police, we tried to interpret as best as we can. What was quite apparent right from the start was that where Glenn was lying when we found him was potentially not the place that he was attacked. We found a number of knives. The first knife that we found was indicated by Dawn that is the knife that Glenn used to attack her, and then she subsequently used to attack Glenn. In one of the living rooms on a shelf, we found a knife very similar in description to what we believe to be the murder weapon. And also in Dawn's bedroom, we found a further knife as well.
The knives are sent off to forensics for analysis, while Mead attempts to make sense of the scene inside Dawn's cottage.
All we know is that she says she stabbed her lodger because he attacked her. What I can say at that stage is that there was a particular area in his bedroom which would indicate there had been an attack in there. There was also quite clear evidence that somebody with a bloodletting injury had come down the stairs at some point, whether that's fallen, walked. And then we also know that there was pooling of blood at the bottom of the stairs, which was consistent with where Glenn was found when we first arrived. All I'm left with at that stage is almost a blank canvas of me then having to piece together what's happened from using her initial call.
Is the patient breathing?
Hello, hello.
Hello, is the patient breathing?
No, I don't know. I haven't touched him.
Clearly Dawn is upset, but she's still compos mentis. She's still able to have a normal conversation and answer questions. I'm intrigued about the veracity of her appearing to be upset and distraught.
Just tell me exactly what's happened.
Right, I don't know really what happened. He's a lodger, I wanted him out. I said no. I went to the door, he stabbed me in the leg.
It's quite shocking how sort of calm she is, you know, the initial hello, hello. If you stab somebody, you would be hysterical on the phone.
I took the knife off him, I stabbed him, he fell down the stairs, I stabbed him again because he was trying to take the knife off me.
Dawn was claiming self-defence. She claimed she thought that her life was in danger. If Dawn's story was true, then It's an incredibly scary experience.
She goes into a lot of detail about what's happened. Certainly tells us that she stabbed him a number of times. But I just have the opinion is all about Dawn Lewis. It's all about, you know, I'm fine, don't worry about me, worry about Glenn, you know, I've done this horrible thing to him because he was horrible to me, but let's all worry about him now. Just the underlying thing to me is it's about self-preservation.
I've called you, and you just not got it breathing.
Does she come across as believable? You know, you listen to that call, is that somebody that's in shock, or is that someone who's genuinely upset? I don't know. We have 24 hours initially to interview Dawn. Obviously, I want her treated for her injuries first to make sure she's comfortable so I can get the best opportunities to get the best interview I can out of Dawn Lewis. To find out exactly, in her opinion, what's gone on within that house.
Dawn is ready to be questioned in custody.
She was interviewed 7 times over the next 2 days, and throughout those interviews, she answered no comment to all the questions we asked her. She's not denying in her initial calls that she stabbed Glenn. What she's saying is, I stabbed him in retaliation to him stabbing me, or in self-defense, to protect herself. Is Dawn telling us the truth?
Neil Mead has just 24 hours with Dawn in custody before he must either charge or release her. He turns to Glenn's past and makes a shocking discovery.
I found out that Glenn had a previous conviction himself. Back in the early 2000s, Glenn had been convicted of killing his wife.
Glenn's horrific past conviction changes the entire focus of the investigation. Police immediately delve deeper into his past.
Glenn was an ex-sergeant in the Metropolitan Police. He got married in 1992, but by 1998, their relationship and their marriage had completely fallen apart. Glenn had suspected his wife of having an affair, and his jealousy turned into rage and hatred.
We know he was released from duties due to mental health. It probably would have been intent. If I can't have her, nobody else will. A restraining order was put in place. And for him to breach it as well, he's showing that he doesn't care about authority, that, you know, he's going to do everything he can to get her back.
Glenn had become obsessed and wasn't willing to let her go. He was described at the time as being a control freak, very jealous, and someone his wife feared so much she had a panic alarm fitted at her home that caught the devastating attack on camera.
Glenn hangs outside the family house. His wife takes their children bowling, and after she returns, he knocked on the door. When she answered, he stabbed her 4 times in the chest and he killed her in front of his own 2 sons.
We can see that he was a perpetrator of abuse and coercive controlling behaviour, and he did the ultimate.
Glenn appears in front of a judge at the Old Bailey in March 2002.
Glenn ended up getting a comparatively light sentence, so instead of a charge of murder, he got diminished responsibility, which downgraded it to manslaughter. And that would have been in the context of his mental health issues. This is the kind of case that I give evidence for regularly as an expert witness and forensic psychiatrist. So what it would have meant is, at the time, he and his defence team would have proved that Glenn had a mental illness which affected his ability to understand his own conduct, or to form a rational judgment, or to exhibit self-control. In terms of the impact that the murder that Glenn committed would have had on his children, I mean, it would be utterly devastating. They would have to mourn 2 parents, their mother who was killed, and also their father who would then go to prison for many, many years.
In 2011, Glenn was released from prison on a life licence and probation, supposedly rehabilitated, obviously trying to keep his head down and just sort of integrate in society.
Is that conviction relevant to this investigation? Obviously it's relevant. He's killed somebody in a domestic circumstance before with a knife. Is Dawn telling us the truth? She's living with a proven violent man that's previously taken her life. Does that add more credence to her story that she was defending herself? Or was she using that as a lever to, again, get people to believe that what she does was in response to him attacking her and her being scared?
Well, to be honest, with Glenn, none of us knew about his history. All we knew about Glenn really is what Dawn told us. It was very hard to think that he would have done that.
Neighbours discover why Glenn was so desperate to stay at Dawn's cottage.
He had the plan in his head that he wanted to meet up with his son. He was striving very hard to accomplish that. So in order not to go back to prison for what he had done, he was doing what was ever required of him to stay out of trouble.
There was a plan for Glenn to meet his sons, and part of the probation, the conditions, was a fixed abode. So he needed to stay at Dawn's place to show he was trying to move forward with his life. And Dawn knew that. She almost used it as a tool of manipulation, knowing that she could push the boundaries a little bit, and it would be very hard for him to try and move out.
To me, this is really a unique case. You know, you've got somebody who was a perpetrator of abuse to all of a sudden become the victim of somebody who's more controlling than you. But he still would have had that element of abuse and control and coercion because he was a perpetrator. But he's got to suppress that for his future.
There's no dispute that he was stabbed by Dawn. The dispute is the reason why Dawn stabbed him.
Faced with two aggressive individuals and no witnesses, Neil Meade needs a breakthrough.
Dawn had 3 stab wounds to her right thigh. Very linear. We had a comment made by a doctor in A&E saying these injuries are self-inflicted. That obviously pricked my ears up when I was told that. If you get stabbed once, however deep it is, you're going to move because it hurts. So to stand there while she stabbed 3 times in the leg and not move because these injuries are literally in a line down her leg, again, sort of increased my suspicion that they may well be self-inflicted.
This is an incredibly hard thing to do psychologically because you want to make the wound deep enough for it to look credible, but at the same time, it's going to be petrifying. You're going to want to minimize the amount of pain and the amount of injury and disability.
That's so unusual for me. I've never experienced it before. It made a real strong suggestion to me that there may be more to this case than initially seen.
Neil Meade returns to the crime scene and considers the layout of Dawn's historic country cottage.
There had been an assault that led to a bloodletting injury in the corner of his bedroom. So my view was at that stage, why would she then go into his bedroom? You know, you're scared of somebody, why go into their domain, essentially? Why go into the lion's cage if you're scared of them? So for me as a senior investigator, I'm saying at that stage, there's nothing more I can do with Dawn in custody. This is as far as I can take this. I'm going to go to the CPS and ask if I can charge.
Dawn Lewis is charged with the murder of Glenn Richards.
It was shortly after that when our friend made a panic knock at the door.
The man who Dawn described as her boyfriend has unexpectedly arrived at Chilkwell Street.
He looked terrible, absolutely awful. He was in shock. You just knew something was wrong, so we brought him in and we just went, "What's wrong?" He said, "I think I've missed something out, and I think it might be..."
Leading the investigation, I'm keen to know what he's got to say.
The man Dawn Lewis sometimes described as her boyfriend gives a statement to the police.
Earlier in the evening, he's had a video phone call from Dawn. And during that video call, he says that she's obviously upset with the situation with Glenn, but then goes to tell us that on that video call, Dawn is waving a knife around, and she says, "What should I do? Should I just stab him and then stab myself and make out that he attacked me?" And Dawn turns and shows him right at the top of her thigh. From where he indicates she was going to stab herself is exactly where Dawn stabbed herself, literally hours before she killed him.
I'm going to stab him and then I'm going to stab myself. And what happened? That was within hours of it happening. So was she scared of him, of Glenn? No, she bloody well wasn't.
The police hand over the new incriminating evidence to the CPS, and the murder trial of Dawn Lewis begins at Bristol Crown Court.
At the start of any murder trial, there's quite a lot of anticipation. The courtroom reflected the community. There were supporters for both Glenn and for Dawn. So if Dawn was able to prove that she did act in self-defence and the jury believed her story, then she would walk free from court at the end of the trial.
Dawn pleads not guilty to murder.
Through this case, what was always in my mind was, I have got a man that he's got a violent past and previously taken somebody else's life in really horrific circumstances. So right through this trial, it was always on the balance.
The prosecution opening began by playing a 999 call.
He's a lodger, I wanted him out. He stabbed me in the leg, I took the knife off him, I stabbed him again.
It began by playing the police body-worn footage, which shows Dawn being arrested.
Move backwards, move backwards. Get on the floor, get on the floor, turn over, turn over.
It really tried to paint a picture and bring to life the horror of what had happened in that home in Glastonbury into the courtroom.
The prosecution called George and Patricia to the witness box.
It was stress, stress, stress. I didn't want to be there, but you have to do your thing. You have to say it as it is, which is hopefully what I did.
You looking at Dawn, sitting in the dock, and you don't want to be the person to say something that puts it over the edge, but I have to be honest.
You didn't know whether it was going to stick, or whether she was going to get off, or how long it was going to be. Are you free, or are you then at risk? That was my fear.
Next to give evidence is the Home Office pathologist who conducted Glenn's post-mortem.
Glenn sustained 5 stab wounds to the torso, and at least one of those would have been fatal. Also, there were some wounds to his hands, suggest that he may well have put up a fight against the knife. At this stage, Dawn's story could be true. The injuries to Glenn could be caused in a way that Dawn...
Fantasising about how he would have carried out the killing of his former wife differently. She said at one stage, I was terrified that he was just going to jump out and kill me, and claimed to be living with that constant fear. Really trying to paint a picture that she was terrified that she was going to die in the attack, and really playing on the emotions and the fears that generated. What she didn't count upon is a friend coming forward. As a journalist, you try to go into things with an open mind. You're not there to judge yourself, you're there to report on the facts and the evidence as it's been presented to court. But there are some moments in trials, clearly, when it has an impact.
The man Dawn used to describe as her boyfriend takes the stand.
The poor guy spent 2 full days in the witness box. That is stress. I mean, he was just coming down here for a relaxing day with the buddies, and all of a sudden he's in the middle of a murder trial.
He details their video call for the jury.
It was not just the fact that he'd outlined the murderous intent of Dawn that day, but it was the level of detail and description in which Dawn had described the attack that she planned to him, including physically mimicking a stabbing motion and how she would then claim self-defence. That for me was such compelling evidence that I feel really Dawn struggled to come back from.
Dawn probably thought by telling her friend what she was going to do that they weren't going to disclose her plans to the police, but to have that self-assurance speaks volumes of what Dawn was as a person. She's got such power and control over Glenn that perhaps she thought this was spilling into the friendship with this new person she was friendly with.
After the closing statements, the jury retire.
Ultimately, it came down to, did they believe what the friend was saying? If they believed what he was saying, they couldn't do anything but convict. I genuinely didn't know what the jury were going to find.
The concern was that when we came home, she'd be in her house, knowing that we had sat on the stand going, this is what we heard, this is what we seen. She may have animosity towards us, and the next thing you know, you're the next target. So, yeah, it was fearful because we didn't know whether or not it was going to be safe to come back to your own home.
The jury deliberate for 9 hours. They come back 11-1 guilty for murder. The judge accepts a majority verdict, and Dawn Lewis is sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years.
One of the most moving parts of the whole proceedings for me was listening to Glenn's son's victim impact statement. He witnessed Glenn kill his mother as an 11-year-old child and hadn't seen Glenn since that fateful day. But it also transpired that just 2 weeks after Glenn died, he was due to meet Glenn for the first time through a restorative justice programme, where he was finally able to speak to Glenn and try to bring a small amount of closure for what happened 20 years previously. Dawn cheated him of the chance to confront Glenn about what had happened, and for that you can't feel anything but complete and utter disgust.
She's been exposed as a very manipulative person that was quite happy to kill somebody else to get to her own means. She wanted Glenn moved out of the house. There was an easy solution to it. One phone call to probation and they would have moved Glenn out of that premises. But she chose to concoct a story where she could kill Glenn.
In my eyes, Dawn's a typical perpetrator of abuse. She's reeled, basically, a vulnerable person in, regardless of what he's done prior to that. As a convicted killer, with his past history as well, he would have been controlling and jealous. But I do believe this instant that Dawn was the more controlling and dominant person in this relationship, and he had to be submissive and vulnerable because he had one goal ahead of him, and that was to build some sort of relationship with his sons.
Dawn will be in prison until at least 2042, but the shadow of her crimes still hangs heavy on the once happy neighborhood where she lived.
This is my home forever. It absolutely disrupted the street here. There were great friendships down here, but now everybody's got kind of secluded now. It put fear into a lot of people where there was no fear before.
From someone that you thought was your friend, I think that she honestly believed that she